Welcome everybody to the Imperial 80s. We got Hiram Rivera back. What is this? Is this the fourth one we've had? How many times
Yeah,
have we
I
done?
think this is 4. I think this is my
I think
4th.
this is fourth. Yeah. The people's guest, as I wrote on some of the social media posts. Everybody knew I will say somebody was like, oh, the accents are gonna be outrageous. And I was like, how do people know that we bring Hiram on just so that we don't have to do the accents and look so
Accents are fun, bro.
No. This movie especially. All right,
Yeah.
so I mean, thanks everybody. Like, share, subscribe, get this out to folks. I'm really looking forward to this. This has been one that has been on our minds for a long time, and it's actually perfect timing right now too, because Cuba being so in the news with all the efforts to you know kidnap Raul Castro, overthrow the Communist Party there, and everything else. It gives us a window to talk about that stuff through this film in a way that actually, like, I kind of have memory hold the degree of how much that played into this film. I think because as a kid, my parents were not anti-communist, right? And so like they would anytime that stuff was in films, they were just like, oh, that's nonsense, basically. But this movie, I'll just start with my childhood memories of it. I mean, first of all, how crazy it is to have childhood memories of a film like this. Yeah. But and I don't remember how old I was. I don't think I saw it in the 80s because it came out in 83, but I saw it in the early 90s for sure. It was on TV a lot. Obviously, that was like an edited version of it, but then it would be on like HBO or Cinemax or whatever else. And I watched this movie a ton of times, and I think more than even that, and I know we will talk about this, but it was, I think of all the movies that we've done so far, and we've done some influential 80s movies, but this had the most influence within like a certain cultural sector that I know that all of us grew up in, which is hip hop music and culture, right? Um, yeah, Wu Tang. I mean, we will get into all of it. Scarface, the rapper. I mean, there's so much. In fact, it's even trying to come up with some kind of list, and I know we'll probably talk about some of that stuff of all the references within hip hop. It's really impossible because like there's so many just lyrics or names that are derivative of characters in this. So we will talk about some of those things along the way, but just to say that this it was inescapable. I think the influence of this film, like even if you didn't see it, I feel like it had an impact on just the culture that we grew up in such a way that like you kind of had to see it just so you understood what people were talking about in a certain way. um but yeah, and so yeah, I remember seeing it at a fairly young age. I think probably, again, this is one of the instances where my father had a soft spot for people who were really good actors. And so because Pacino was in it, he probably was like, yeah, like you can watch this even though this is a deeply fucked up movie at some point. Um but yeah, so that's my childhood memory of it. I saw it many times. I've watched it, a few times since I grew up just because they're just, you know, it's almost just the nostalgia, I guess, of it to some extent. But yeah, we'll get into all of that. So yeah, Hiram, why don't you go?
Yeah, I'm sure I saw it or clips of it when I was a kid, around when it came out because my dad would watch those movies. I don't remember. I remember it more in college and it being like the movie everyone had in their dorm room. And I started school in 95. So from 95 to like 99, right? That was, and again, the hip hop references and all the stuff. So it was just on all the time. And if you were trying to like, you're trying to bag shorties, which I wasn't bagging shorties in college, right? But those who were bagging shorties in college was like, yo, you want to come watch a movie, and you had the whole little like TV VCR in one. Like you were the man if you had that, right? And that Scarface was in there because I don't know. I guess we thought teenage girls wanted to watch coked out Tony Montana as much as we did. They didn't, but that was the only video you had in there, right? Queued up to that scene, the end scene with Tony just going crazy, snorting mad cocaine. And so that is my memory of it, of just kind of, I had the poster, the first poster I had in my first college dorm room there were two of them because it was me and my roommate Mark. We had the Tony Montana one with him in the chair with the mountain of cocaine. Mind you, I've been straight edge my whole entire life. I've never touched a cigarette, alcohol, any drugs or whatever. But we had Tony Montana and a mountain of cocaine up in our dorm room. And then I have, till this day, I still have it. It's a 6-foot Wu-Tang Clan poster that I kept. Those were the only two, right? And so Tony was just kind of like, you just had to have Tony. There had to be some sort of Scarface, something, at least at that time, from like 95 to 99. And so my memories of it, which and just the quotes, the endless quotes, right? Folks just quoting the movie nonstop all the time. And so some of my memories of my youth, at least college, that college period, definitely was laced with all kinds of Scarface references. And of course, and really quick, want to give a shout out, my beloved New York Knicks, who are in the finals, who are gonna do the thing. You know, we prayed for times like this, and I still have, I broke it out. I haven't broken it out. I still have my placard from 1999, the finals in 1999, that says I still believe. This was 27 years I've still been believing. And we're gonna get our get back on those cowboys and cowgirls and cow people in San Antonio, Texas. So
did that say Puerto Rican Day Parade at the bottom there?
Oh, no doubt. It's the Puerto Rican Day Parade. New York Knicks, I still believe, and in Spanish for the bilingual fans. Yes. And for the bilingual fans in San Antonio, Tejas.
That must have been a wild 99 Puerto Rican Day Parade in New York with the Knicks in the finals. That must have been a time.
Dog, it's the last parade I went to. It was epic. It was amazing. It's the Knicks, it's the Puerto Rican parade before the cops took it over. It's Tony Montana, right? It's the terror squad, right? So it's like the terror squad, wild Puerto Ricans in the parade with Tony Montana quotes, and the New York Knicks doing the dent where they were hurt, so they lost to bum ass Texas. But you know, it is what it is. We're gonna get our get back. We're gonna get our get back on those. I don't even know what they have in Texas. I can't even make jokes about it. I don't know, stagecoaches and shit, taco trucks, I guess. I don't know what they have in Texas, but we're gonna get our get back on those folks.
Yeah. I mean, I'll say this. I don't know a world without Scarface. That's kind of how it exists. I mean, it came out when I was 3. I remember being well aware of it as a piece. My uncle had the two VHS joint. It would like sit on like his counter. It was like one of his prized possessions. So I always knew one day I would graduate to be able to watch it. I remember seeing bits and pieces of it late night on TV or something. If I like woke up, my dad probably sneaking in watching it. I remember I would ask my dad about it, and he'd be like, "When you're older, you can see it." But he had this reverence though. It was like, "But what you're gonna have to see this one day." And I'm gonna get into this because I think this is actually part of the pernicious part of this movie. And I think it's really evident if you grew up in particular places, because people don't understand how the ideology of Scarface has dominated so many people that I know personally. And it's deeply nihilistic, and it's poison. It's poison, in my opinion. But we'll get into that. So I have also other relationships that I should name with this movie in other kind of ways, which we'll talk about too. So when I then became a teenager, I was a big Pacino fan. And I ventured into seeing it. Probably I was like 12 or 13 when I finally watched it. I got my version of the VHS. I watched them all the time. I watched this movie in exhaust with my homies. I had homies I was very close to. We used to, like, Scarface was something we would, like, maybe not go a few months without gathering up, watching pieces of it, putting it on. I used to, like, take scenes and watch scenes, all that type of stuff. And then, you know, hip hop, especially when Only Built for Cuban Links came out, I remember being with my cousins, and then we get the album, the Raekwon album, and then I told you a long time ago, Tony. You know, you're like, oh, you're like, he's graphic criminology, all that type of stuff happening, and you're just like, whoa, like it was part of the whole thing. Where the movie became complicated for me was in a couple of areas, and this is very true. I had a couple homies who got into some real heavy shit with drugs and things like that, going to jail. And I remember Scarface was part of their mentality. While they were doing that, I was kind of getting politically awakened a bit, right? And I remember specifically, I read Amiri Baraka's Cuba Libre short essay about him going to Cuba, right? And that began to kind of change my thoughts around Cuba, especially when also I heard that when of Castro and Malcolm in Harlem. I grew up there, so these things started changing my views. I started to see the movie a little bit differently in terms of, like, because I kind of got like anti the gangsterism, especially because I got really into like underground hip hop. Even though I still loved Wu and I like was in that contradiction, but I started like questioning the kind of iconography of like all the like mafioso shit. So Scarface became this thing that like I began to like as like an actor person. So I started doing that shit, right? I got into this like, oh, it's Shakespearean, you know, look at the performances. I had a lot of reverence for a lot of the people in it. You know, Robert Loggia, all this type of stuff as I was building kind of my actor kind of life and that kind of mentality, which I also think is a very shitty one as well, which I'll get into. In around 2004, and I'll talk about him more, I was cast in a film that many people know is the prequel to Carlito's Way, Rise to Power. It is directed by Michael Bregman, who is the son of Martin Bregman, who was the producer of this film, Scarface, and was Pacino's really longtime manager. I think Martin Bregman stopped being his manager around the Scent of a Woman era. Like, right, that was like kind of the end of that, right? So I kind of spent some serious time, like 3-4 months, and really after that, like even the post-production time around them a lot. And it taught me a lot about New York movie making, the weirdness of it. And my reverence level for it immediately went down. Especially because my politics I was trying to reconcile my politics with movie making. Right. And I'll talk more about Martin Bregman and them in a minute when we get to it. So as the years have gone on, a lot of these movies have their purchase on me has really dissipated, right? As I got more analytical about them on a multitude of levels, right? So kind of where I sit with it now is very much like, yeah, this shit's a problem. It's a problem, you know, and you can laugh and joke at it, and I can't lie. There's some scenes in this joint that I still this shit, it's hilarious. Man, some of it is funny as hell, right? And I also see where the excitement comes from, but that excitement is like, ooh, it's like this is it's like poison. You're like, it's real. So yeah, I'm looking forward to breaking into that. But yeah, it's been a long journey with this movie, and there's also other things, and we'll talk about that as we get to it. It's in some ways like I know too much when it comes to this shit.
Yeah, no, thank you for that. I mean, Mtui, do you want to talk about any of the like folks that
Yeah,
involved in the creation beyond what
yeah,
just laid out there?
yeah. So I'll kind of give. So the story that's been told is that so Pacino. We should get into him because it kind of like starts. Pacino, you could do the quick kind of. He's from New York, East Harlem. Grew up pretty poor. Dropped out of school. Just kind of a street kid. He says like acting saved his life, really, essentially, right? He was someone who didn't really have a lot of opportunities. He was very spunky. He kind of got involved in that type of stuff. Then he met a lot of the downtown theater people. One of the most famous people that he gets next to is Lee Strasberg, the famous method acting teacher. Pacino is like seen as like one of the heirs of method acting, right? Kind of like after Brando is Pacino, De Niro. We can talk a lot about that type of stuff. And it's very growing up in New York and then being an actor, that stuff is very legendary. And I've been in the actor's studio. It's like, so even working with the Bregmans, it was like, oh, when people heard that I did that, it was like, oh my God, you're like walking into like, New York movie making royalty. And it was interesting, the kind of faces that I saw there. So Pacino, Bregman was his manager, and they basically, a lot of the films that they did that the Bregmans also produced, like Serpico, Dog Day Afternoon, I think later Sea of Love, a lot of those films were Bregman productions. Pacino says that he one day saw the Paul Mooney film, the original, because remember, Scarface is a remake. It's a remake of a 1932 Code film, which is really also, I'd recommend people see it. If you've never seen that, I actually will watch it. It's pretty intense. And Pacino saw it and he was like, I want to remake this, right? So he went to Bregman. Bregman remembered it. Bregman was like, I love it. So they basically optioned it. And that's kind of what they were always kind of think about things for Pacino. And remember, this is like Pacino at like the height of his powers. And honestly, right before his big actually like fall off. Because 2 years later, he does Revolution, which we will not do. It's a terrible fucking movie that we should never do. It's so bad. We should do it, but we should. It's also, I don't want to make y'all watch it. But this was like the height of his power. So greenlighting, particularly with Pacino, was like not that hard, right? He's had Oscar nominations. He's had controversial losses. He's like considered like possibly the greatest living actor, in the country. So they optioned this film, right? The first person they hired to write it is this guy David Rabe. David Rabe is a playwright of significant kind of purchase. If you know theater from the 70s, wrote a place about military. He seems as like very kind of transgressive writer. And Brian De Palma, which we'll come back to in a second. Raven De Palma, they write like a script. They don't really like it, so they kind of get out of it, right? Sidney Lumet then comes in, and Sidney Lumet is like the first person who's going to basically take it on. And Oliver Stone, who had already directed a film called The Hand, it was a failure. Bregman is like, yo, how about you take a stab on writing this, right? So they bring in Stone first. They actually bring in Stone, I think slightly before Lumet. I can't remember which way it goes. But it's kind of around the same time. So Stone starts writing the script. Lumet is the one who has the idea to make it about Cuba, and we'll get into Mariel boat and the harbor and all that type of stuff. It was Lumet's idea. He said, I want to make it a Cuban. I want to play with the Miami thing that's happening right now. Let's make it happen. So Stone starts writing. That shit is crazy. He's such a weirdo. I watched an interview with him about this. So Stone basically went down to Miami. He said he was doing coke down there, like hanging out with like, people in the clubs, trying to get a vibe with it. But he said he admits this, he spent a significant amount of time around U.S. attorneys. He's basically getting this dossiers from U.S. attorneys, right? And unless he doesn't really want to talk about who he talked to as gangsters, though I don't think he really did talk to gangsters, This film is really comes from the information that he gets from U.S. attorneys. Him and Bregman were doing that. They were talking to them, getting all that stuff and like adapting stories. They write a script. They send it to Lumet. Lumet hates it. Lumet is like, yo, I want to do a film that's more political, right? I want to talk about the politics of drugs coming in, maybe even touch some of the stuff about, you know, the politics of like the U.S. presidents and how it with Cuba, so forth and so on. I'm not saying Lumet wanted to make a radical picture. I'm not suggesting that at all. Though Lumet, I would say he definitely had more interest in like in politics. If you see like Network and things like that, he's not a radical at all. He's a liberal, but you know, he definitely had more interesting thoughts. Bregman was like, nope, absolutely not. And they had a big disagreement and Lumet left. And apparently, and I was told this, that it actually ended their relationship forever. They had done many movies together. Lumet was actually really pissed about it. And they never, and it was like a big like split between them. So they bring in Brian De Palma. Now, people know Brian De Palma because De Palma at that time was like a big genre filmmaker. He was Carrie, things like The Fury, you know, lots of horror, weird movies, stuff like that. But De Palma wanted to get in because he said he wanted to do something that felt like an old Hollywood classic, big gangster thing that he could do that was like Shakespearean. And he said he loved the script. He said he loved the violence. And if you watch De Palma movies, if you've watched Carrie, the guy loves violence. He's a bit of a violence pornographer, if you ask me. He's just into it. So I think he saw this as an opportunity to do a big violent spectacle. A little bit around Martin Bregman. So Martin Bregman was a club owner in the city, right? He got his money in the clubs and stuff like that. I hung out with him a little bit. Yeah, you know, it's interesting when you around them folks. Like,
okay,
you know,
okay.
they
right.
You
Tume in the club with the big dogs. Okay.
I mean, all I'll say is this is like
humble flex.
Like, but no, it's also like being around that, like they're in the clubs, he makes his money in like the 60s and the 50s. And the one thing I want to say about New York movie making is that a lot of that, especially in the 80s, a lot of that money is mixed in lots of different weird spaces. And there's stuff you'll never know, how movies got funded, who they got to, who they got access to. It's all very weird. And I always found it very weird, you know, and I've heard many a story, nothing that I can verify. So the Bregmans were definitely very people who knew everybody in New York, right? Whether it's from politicians to this type of persons. It's, you know, so they got this movie made. They were able to kind of pitch it, do it. Martin Bregman was a very powerful guy until I think he kind of retired. His son took over everything after that. And yeah, you know, that's pretty much that big figure with that one. Let me see if there's a couple of other things to kind of throw in there. Yeah, and then you got the actors. Like, I think a couple big things to point out. This is actually Michelle Pfeiffer and what's her name? Mary Elizabeth Mastrantonio's first big film, right? Pfeiffer, Pacino apparently didn't want at first. He wanted Carrie Fisher to do it. I don't know why she didn't do it. Then Glenn Close was supposed to do it, but they liked Pfeiffer. She came in. She was really hungry for the role. Apparently Stephen Bauer, they said they saw him and they said he was so tall and handsome that they wanted to kind of grab him, you know, and have him in the film, right? And before he even, you know, and I think they might have known that he was Cuban. Which is another thing to kind of add, that he is the only Cuban in the film, but also he's a Cuban with a particular history, you know, where he comes from. And yeah, I mean, I think, and we can get through the cast as we get through the movie. Yeah, I mean, a couple of things to share about Stone, I think, within it. Yeah, that's the last thing I want to share. So Stone says, you know, he was heavily doing coke while he was making the movie, which is just, you know, the irony of all ironies with this movie. And the way he speaks about the movie, and I think we'll talk about it as we get through the story, you kind of see this fascination with Latin America in a very imperialist Western kind of this nasty way, right? That's real sick, right? And yeah, watch his interviews about it. It's pretty weird. It shows you how weird Stone is, right? And yeah, and him and De Palma, they worked hand in hand. Oh, and I have one quote from the cinematographer, and I'm gonna leave it at that. The cinematographer asked Brian De Palma, "How do you want me to shoot the picture?" He said De Palma gave him only really one big note. He said, "I want you to give me the most beautiful pictures, and I'm just going to put violence all in them."
There you go. That's Scarface right there.
That's Scarface.
I just want to quickly, I mean, Hiram, if you have anything to add before we jump in, I mean, we could talk through a lot of this stuff in the movie, but I just do want to note people were mentioning it in the crowd and it was in the audience, and it was one of my notes that I had down was also to just mention Giorgio Moroder, right? And I can't remember. I think one of the other movies that we've done already, he was involved in, and I forgot to mention it, but you know, I mean, he's called like the father of disco and all this. He's a very important producer in the 70s and the 80s. Most notably tied with Donna Summer. Like he produced all of her hit records basically. But he produces this whole album, so all of the music within this. And I mean, I know again we'll talk about different references to hip hop, but his work on this soundtrack is also sampled heavily within hip hop songs. Folks like Nas. I'm trying to think of even Mobb Deep. Many others, right, have sampled his different parts of the soundtrack on this, different loops. But he also, I mean, the whole synthesizer heavy like music that you get in the 80s, he is very much kind of one of the central figures in like developing that style and incorporating synthesizers into pop music and mainstream music. And so a lot of other folks, even if it's not, by him, continue to use his style. And it becomes difficult actually at a certain point because he is sampled so heavily in so many genres, of even looking at his credits of like, well, did he actually produce on this or did they just sample him? Like he's all over like Beyonce's album, the not the most recent one, the cowboy one, but the one before that, where she, did the kind of disco house. People called it house, but it wasn't really. It was like Euro pop stuff. But anyway, he's still alive, still does some musical stuff, but was just hugely influential in this period. Also, to folks who might be nostalgic as I am about it, did the soundtrack to Never Ending Story. Just want to total contrast to this movie. He gave us Scarface and the Never Ending Story. So
I mean,
I've never seen that movie.
Really?
It's amazing. We're gonna do it eventually.
That's one with the big worm, right? Like the flying worm.
Yeah.
It's a dragon, basically. Yeah.
Dragon,
I never
a big white dragon.
Yeah,
Falcor.
Falcor. Oh man!
I saw the Family Guy episode where Peter was flying it, and Peter was too heavy, and then he crashed it.
Okay, so do we want to jump into the movie? Yeah, actually, I think let's jump into the movie because I think also the beginning of the movie is another historical context that I think we gotta like dip into. Because so I will say how Scarface starts, like the one thing I will say about De Palma is that he's always really good at or really effective in like tone, right? Like establishing a kind of like, big tone to everything. And so you get like the music starts to come in, right? And those like pulsating, like strings and like, Though for me, someone already mentioned, I can't lie. Every time I hear that now, I just hear G-O-D, Father Part 3, QBC, Sip Lime Pecan Tea. Like, it just comes into my head. It's like, when the movie's over, I have to grab my phone and just pop out to that violent ass song though, because the intro of Godfather Part 3 is just so damn
life is mine.
yeah, or just like shooting like shoot the guy from the balcony, which like is part of the whole thing with Scarface, and I gotta get into. But yeah, you get that, and you get the opening scroll, right, of the why everything is happening. Jay, do you have that? Do we have that actually? The what it says up top.
I can find it real quick. Yeah, I mean, I'll give a summary while we pull it up. But basically, in 1980, and this is true. Like, so, I probably should have done a little more history on it, but I think it was essentially something somewhat. I don't know, because it happened in the specific context also of the Carter administration too, right? And so there's like this kind of human rights refugee framework in which some of it comes up that wouldn't take place now, you know? But basically in 1980, there's like this period in which Fidel Castro like opens up to allow some people who have been separated from family members in the United States to basically go to the United States, right? And I think it's something like 125,000. I think that number is actually correct in terms of how many people did emigrate in that period. Go ahead. Yeah.
A little before that, what was happening was that the United States had been supporting folks and encouraging folks to leave Cuba, and the Cuban government had been, calling them out on that, right? That they're agitating folks to do this. It's dangerous. People die. It causes problems. But the U.S. had been doing that. The U.S. had been doing that first through their Operation Peter Pan, when they were stealing children from Cuba, right? Who they were saying that they were freeing them because the communists were going to steal them from their parents and strip parents of their parental rights, and so we had to take these children to the United States. So they were the Catholic. It was a Catholic nonprofit. It was basically stealing children and bringing them to the United States. And so the Cuban government had been calling the U.S. out, and they said, they work with them to notify them like people are leaving, because it's a whole Coast Guard and maritime thing. But they were accusing the U.S. of encouraging folks of doing this stuff. And so then Fidel was like, fine, we can settle this and just have, right, if you want them and folks want to leave, we'll open it up and allow those who want to leave to leave. What you had were folks in Miami were going back and forth with their boats trying to it was just causing too many problems. So the Cuban government opened it up on this day, and they're like, look, for those who want to leave, here is the way you can leave and go. And so all those boats, is about 1,700 boats. They were privately owned boats from Cubans in Florida who sailed to Cuba, took folks, and then brought them back to the U.S., which is the only time that the U.S. has ever brought in that many people at one time and created like a whole shit show on this side, right? Of how do you pass folks through, document all that, right? It was just kind of like a flood. And at the time, when you look at the news clips from that time, folks were pissed off. This is an invasion. These are aliens, right? They're going to bring crime and rape. Like all the stuff you hear now is the same exact stuff that they were saying. This is going to destroy our country, right? Like boom, 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 boom. And then the whole thing of whether Fidel, what the story was that Fidel emptied out all of the prisons and insane asylums or mental health institutions and put them on the boats and sent them. And so there's a clip in that beginning of Fidel saying, we don't want them and we don't need them. And it kind of ends, and then it shows them all poor people on the boats trying to make their way to Florida because poor them, right? Which wasn't the case at all. So again, it was the United States was provoking a lot of stuff. So Fidel was like, fine, you want them that bad, here you go. And then that scene of where it's like, it ends with him saying, we don't want them, we don't need them. The full quote was, he who has no revolutionary genes, he who has no revolutionary blood, he who does not have a mind that adapts to the idea of a revolution. He who does not have a heart that can adapt to the effort of heroism required by a revolution. We don't want them. We don't need them. And so it's very specific people he was talking to. It's like, look, if y'all don't want to be here and you don't want to adapt to what we're building and you don't want to commit to what we are building here, then we don't need you because you serve no purpose. And in that full speech, he's also talking about the lumpen element. And so this is where they're getting this, right? The INS, the International Immigration, whatever, right? They claim after they researched everything, less than 2% of the people who came in Mariel were actually severe criminals who actually, right? That was all a lie that he emptied jails or whatever. It was actually less than 2%. But Fidel was like, you know, these lumpen elements exist. And so the folks who were taking over embassies in Peru, folks who were causing all kinds of stuff, he was like, here you go. Just because we have a revolution doesn't mean that those elements and those things still don't exist in our society, still don't, right? And that these folks who you're bringing, who you're calling political refugees, who you're calling, you know, political prisoners and all that, this is also who you're bringing. And so when they turn up in Miami and they start doing what they're doing, they turn up in Peru and they start wilding out, this is who you are lifting up as political prisoners. And his argument is that they're not freeing political persecution. They're just folks trying to come up, right? They're just folks trying to get something, basically Tony Montana, right?
I mean, this movie, one of the things I said before we started is like, is there a better vindication of Fidel Castro's policies than like getting Tony Montana the fuck out of the country?
But then also, like, he's highly mythological as well. Like, there's this concept, because I remember an ex of mine, she's from Miami, and I remember, and her really good friend was definitely a right-wing Cuban, and they believed that. They were like, yeah, you know, it's these people that they brought here from Cuba. Michelle Pfeiffer's character says it, the Cuban crime wave, right? It was a thing that was literally propagandized within the country, and in particular in Miami at the time. Like, the reason why you're having this is because of this influx of Cubans. Like, there's a line that he says, yeah, Castro's trying to fuck us, right? And I remember that as a kid, when I watched the film, before I knew anything about it, when I watched the movie early on, I just saw Castro as like this real, like, woo, that motherfucker's scary, right? You know, I see it now with Hiram. I'm like, you're damn right. Get out. Tell him, Fidel. You know, I'm like, bro, you know, be my brother. You know, but when I was younger, like, the way with the music goes up, you get this one little thing, this shot of Fidel. He's like in like a rage point. You see people with placards, and then you see this boats. And that's another thing I think to be really pointed out is this idea of communist countries causing humanitarian crises. Because you also have the quote unquote boat people with Vietnam, right? And that becomes a huge thing in the news of the 80s, right? All these communist nations, they're just making refugees who are coming onto the shores of first world nations. These places are terrible. So when they start destabilization efforts, right, everything is justified, right? Everything is justified, right? So the framing of this movie up top, you know, rewatching it again, I felt this for quite some time. You begin to see the kind of popular ideology of how we're supposed to situate ourselves with communist nations, right? With leaders, right? And even to a certain degree with Tony, which we'll get to, is the first person you meet, right? Tony Montana, right? You first person you meet. While you think he's like crazy, when he's kind of raging at communism, you kind of like go, well, shit, lab. I guess this is communism's fault that we got this guy, right? Blame this motherfucker, right? Oh shit, look at what they're creating over there, right? Which becomes the kind of, you know, prominent thought. And I think we'll get to this. I'll get to this at some point, because this is also, I think, a call out that I need to make around this generation of filmmakers and so forth, who saw themselves as like smarter than everybody else. So they were like this anti everything. They're anti-communism. They're anti-capitalism, except for when it comes to making their own fucking money and being excessive and making their own movies. You know, like this is not an anti-capitalist movie because it's in a capitalist mode of production. It's bullshit in that kind of way, right? So that's kind of something I want to throw in there. But yeah, so yeah, you get the boats and all of that, and then you get right to that first scene, right? The close-up shot of, you know, what's your name? And he says his name, you know, Tony Montana. Funny joke I found out. I always wondered this. The reason why he's called Montana is partly because of Joe Montana.
Yeah, because Montana's not even a Cuban last name.
No,
like none of those names are if you want to get like OD technical, right? Like you listen to us, like that's not our last name. Like I'm not Cuban, but like Caribbean Latinos tend to have similar names, right? Regions have similar last names based off your countries. Montana isn't in any of them, really. It's not a
yeah. So like he said he partly because he's a 49ers fan. And he said, but the thing with Stone and all these guys is, and this is the thing I think should say up top is they're not really interested in Cuba. They're not really interested even in American politics, as they're interested in kind of creating these like larger myths to kind of situate their own strange ideas about society. And look, you can go right to the sources. They say it. Like, so we should talk about Pacino and his accent, right? And Pacino says the reason why he has the accent in his way is he says he doesn't believe in mimicry, which I actually don't necessarily have a disagreement with. I actually kind of think that's interesting artistically, right? He says the same thing about when he did Jimmy Hoffa in what's the movie most recently with Scorsese about the Hoffa murder with De Niro, The Irishman. If you notice the movie, he doesn't sound like Hoffa at all. He doesn't even attempt to look at it. He says mimicry in films to him is not interesting. He says he likens himself to like an expressionist. So he wants to take kind of the ideas and explore what's interesting to him. So this all has to do with a kind of individualist approach to Western art. They see these little things and they have these little ticks. They're not doing real political reads. It's their own really honestly arrogant way of thinking that they're going to like dive into these deeper kind of concepts, right? But it really is just showing all their weird shit about their sisters and, you know, their relationship to drugs and capital and so forth and so on. So yeah, so you see Pacino kind of roll up and, you know, he's in this kind of circled shot, you know, around these immigration, right, kind of agents, right? It's probably what it is, but I don't know. They're probably are they all immigration?
I think they're INS, yeah.
INS, yeah. And you kind of get the opening where he begins to like, you know, introduce himself, right? He says a couple things that stand out to me, and then I would love for y'all to jump in. Is that he says that his father is from the U.S., right? Which I found interesting. They don't really ever, I think, dig into that again. His dad ends up being like a kind of like floating thing. They don't really like to dig into. He invokes Cagney and Dean, which is it's like a double homage, right? Because this is also a film that is largely about pre-code film logic, and I actually should mention that before, because the original Scarface was made in the code era of movie makers of the 30s, with the Hays Code, meaning you had to follow certain kind of rules and certain things to make films. A lot of them were very moralistic, right? And those gangster films are moral. Go ahead. Mm-hmm.
My understanding is that even though it is like that, the code didn't go into like full enforcement until 34. I don't know if that's 34. What you were going to say.
But no, it's pre-code. My bad. I'm sorry. I switched it. It's pre-code when there wasn't the codes, right? But what happened is those movies that they made, because Scarface is 32, right? A lot of those movies they made, right, were still very moralistic. These pre-code films were about kind of warning about capitalism in this kind of moralistic way. And they were mostly focused on the poor, right? When the poor people would get their hands on money that they wouldn't know how to do with it. It's this vulgarization of that poor people, when they get money, especially poor people from slums, they're going to become these like distorted creatures, so forth and so on. It's very much a pernicious way that rich people look at the poor, right? It's the problem of these movies, things like Public Enemy. And at the end of those films, those people always have to kind of face a very violent kind of ending, right? The big difference, and you'll see in this, is in those films of the 30s, typically there's a repentance, right, by them. So the original Scarface, there's a repentance. Of course, and De Palma says that he wanted to get rid of that. Tony Montana doesn't do a repentance, right? He's unrepentant in that kind of way. So that's like the qualitative difference, right? So there's a shout out to that in it to kind of show that it is of that kind of vibe. The anti-communism, right? Tony, speaks about how much he hates communists, right? In it, tell you to all the time what to do, what to feel, right? Yeah. So I'll throw that out there. I don't know if people have other thoughts in like that opening sequence inside the interrogation room.
I mean, there's just a couple of like great, little anti-communists. I mean, it's just like these offhanded, comments, right? But the whole idea of they tell you what to do, what to think, what to feel, like it's just it's very simplistic, notion of communists. We get right off the bat.
Read it in the accent.
Go ahead, man.
No. You read it in the accent.
I'm not doing the accent. Sheep. You want to do sheep? But yeah, you want to be like a sheep? Bah. I can't do it. But anyway, right? Like, so this is the idea, right? Is that people who stay and want to be with Castro, that they're all sheep. He talks about you work all day, you work 8 to 10 hours, you own nothing, you have nothing, right? And it's a theme throughout. Like, we'll get to it in a second with the Freedom Town, but basically Scarface hates the communists so much that he'll just kill them for nothing, basically, right? Like, that's the vibe that you get. Talks about having Russian shoes with his feet coming through them. And then he talks about, as somebody already put in the chat, eats octopus 3 times a day. He's got octopus coming out his ears, right? So you have all of that. There's also a funny thing just quickly with this scene is that it's done in voiceover, and they put different voices to the actors. So like Dennis Franz from NYPD Blue is doing one of the voices, right? But when you see the guys, they're totally different people who are playing the actors. And even I guess Pacino does some of it voiceover as well, like voicing over his own parts. But yeah, I mean, that's the basics. And the only thing I would say about the father reference to me is I actually think that he's lying, right? In the same way that, like, because he lies about both his parents. He says they're both dead, right? Like, I think it's just a story he's trying to make to kind of legitimate himself to come into the U.S. as a political prisoner and as having a connection to the U.S. through his father, basically. But I don't think any of that's true.
Yeah, the other thing to point out is that does he mention in this that he was in the army?
Yeah,
he does.
I think that's like another, like, I think big point, and it's like it's used various that he's in the military in Cuba, and like
they ask him if he's gay too. Is the other thing that one of the things they ask him if he's a homosexual? Yeah,
right. And all these like lies, how'd you get that scar on your face? Eating pussy, right? And that's one of those famous lies that people say all the time, right? You think I get a scar like that eating pussy, right? Like, it's just so annoying, this movie, in those lines. But one of the things, yeah, I agree with the father thing, and I think one of the overarching things that they want to show is like this desire to be American that exists for all the Cubans who come over, but like the differing ways. So like later when you meet his mother, right, she has a different desire to be an American, right? But Tony has a different desire to be an American, but they all want that pursuit, right? Meaning that this desire leads them to this kind of, certain kind of like political calculation, right? But that desire, that reverence for America, which you see between him and Manolo, so heavy, right? And what America means, it's like a big part of the movie, and it becomes a big part, of the kind of overall ideology that they're exploring in the film.
I got nothing to that.
Nothing to that. Do Do you want to pull up that part you referenced? I can pull it up.
Well, right. So after that,
they
get sent to Freedom Town, right? And so they're pissed off. Remember, because the guys are like, Castro's doing this to us and sending us these criminals over to send, right? And they go to Freedom Town, and that's where they kill Revenga. And Revenga's supposed to be, the story goes that Fidel, and first and foremost, right, his enemies call him Castro. We call him Fidel, right? And so Fidel and Raul. And so that he was Fidel's guy, and they fell out of graces with each other, and then Fidel had him sent off to the United States because Fidel is just like that, right? And again, that feeds into the whole narrative that was being spun, how Fidel had abandoned El Che Guevara, and that's how El Che Guevara gets killed in Bolivia by the CIA because or that Fidel had Camilo Cienfuegos killed in the plane crash in Cuba after, right? So there's all these narratives that Fidel does this. So there's actually a Twilight Zone episode about that. Right, there's a Fidel Twilight Zone episode where he is killing his closest friends and stuff. Right, so that was a part of the narrative that's being spun about Fidel at that time, and continues to be spun. So they go off to this refugee camp. They're in this like tent city thing or whatever, right? And they're like the Cuban official who tortured people and killed people. Right, so these are the good guys. We're gonna kill this guy, and they're gonna guarantee us green cards because the Miami Mafia, they don't call them the Miami Mafia, but they're rich Miami Cubans who came over, who've established themselves, who are paying for this hit on a get back of what would have been a former Cuban official, Emilio Revenga. And so there's a riot, right? It's one of the classic scenes. They yell, Revenga, right? And they corner him like, Libertad, and they're like all rioting because under I-95, a tent city under a highway.
It's actually LA that they filmed that scene too.
It's in LA, but the story is
I know.
But then they roll the text, right? It says August 11th, 1981. There is a riot in Freedom Town of Cuban refugees under I-95 in Miami because of the whatever. There were all kinds of stuff with the refugees when they first came in. They were pissed off and they were upset. But this Freedom Town riot never existed. And there was no Emilio Revenga, right? There was none of that. So the movie portrays it. So they do the first text about Mariel, which was a real event. Then they do this about the Freedom Town riot, but Freedom Town never happened. And so I look it up. I'm Googling it because I was like, wow, I've never heard of this. So I'm Googling, I'm looking it up, right? I can't really find nothing. But Jared, I sent you the picture. Google's AI that pops up now, right, and gives you all the answers or whatever, frames it as a real thing. Right, and I don't know, Jared, if you have the screenshot of that. I took a screenshot. Like, there's no way. There's no way. But Google will frame it and then says it right where a former Cuban official, Emilio Revenga, was killed. Right, the aftermath. So Google AI is reporting this as if this was a real thing. This is the movie.
You're right.
Emilio Revenga is a made-up character for the movie. But Google AI is giving it to you as a Cuban official who was killed in 1981 under I-95, right? An underpass in I-95 where they had this tent city where this one of Fidel's closest people is just in a tent under a highway. I was like, this is wild.
That is wild. And there is a historical event that's quite different. So in 1980, connected again to the Mariel boat lift. So there were over 19,000 Cuban refugees who were held in Fort Chaffee, which is in Arkansas, right? And so nowhere near Miami. They're taken there. They're not given, green cards or released as refugees, right? They're held in a concentration camp at this fort, basically. And because it took so long to process and release them, basically, there was a riot there. And 65 refugees were injured, some by gunfire. So they were shot by the, army or whoever was managing this fort, right? And 46 were arrested, basically. And our buddy Bill Clinton was the governor in Arkansas at the time, and he put heavy fortifications at the center. And actually, this incident was used against him, and he ended up losing a governor election in part related to the politicization of the issue. But anyway, so it was just fascinating, yeah, because they totally make all this up. And the fact that, yeah, now if you Google it on AI, it's going to give you the
Google
movies
AI
version.
just pops up, right? It just automatically, I don't know how to turn it off, so it just automatically pops up. But I looked at it and I saw Revenga highlighted, and I'm like, Revenga's not real. And like the aftermath is that this Cuban official, Emilio Revenga, was kidding. And I was like, yo, this is insane. Fucking AI, right? Like,
imagine the college student right now trying to write an essay.
Who's gonna write the essay? And unless and they probably have some professors like, I've never watched Scarface, I can't watch that. Right, just gonna think that Emilio Revenga is real when the real ones, we know who Revenga is, and we know, right, Revenga's not a real guy. It also speaks, going back to the politicalness or the political nature, whether intentional, unintentional, of Tony's understanding of USA and of USA capitalism, right? Like, he has one goal: to get rich, and feels like this is the country where you can jump everything, you can get rich real quick, and where like the law, the rules, none of that matters. It's kind of like a dog eat dog. Whoever's the biggest dog are willing to do whatever, right? And it comes up with the whole Haas reference, right? A pig that don't fly straight is able to win in this society. And he's excited about that. He's excited about leaving a country where he felt, he's like, they're gonna tell you what to think and what to do when you gotta work all these days and do all. I don't want to. Clearly, he don't want to do none of that. He wants to be in the streets, hustling, killing, getting money, right? And then comes here. He's like, where else can I do that except the United States? The United States, and I can come and do what I gotta do with those annoying ass accents. I'll just say real quick, none of my uncles sound like that. Latinos, for the most part, kind of sound very similar, especially like island Latinos. The accents don't sound like, even the dude Bauer, who's like, he's real Cuban. Aside from the coño Tony, right? It's just like, it wasn't, but it annoys me more. It annoys me more because growing up, and even till today, anybody who tries to imitate a Latino accent goes straight Tony Montana. It's always Tony Montana. It's the Tony Montana accent and the Tony Montana voice. So anytime someone wants to talk, they be like, hey, my friend. I'm like, bro, stop. You don't, I can teach you how to do it, right? It's not that. Stop doing it. But everyone goes straight Tony Montana all the time, and it's annoying, yo. We don't talk like that.
Yeah, and like, to that point, it's funny, like, there's like two ways that I see it, and both of them are bad. It's because that, like, Tony Montana becomes a kind of figure that's larger than everything. So it becomes like a large myth that people of various different tendencies find ways to connect to. Like, I know people who are fairly moral who just watch Scarface so they can get emotionally charged, right? So when they want to like act like they're tough, they go into a Tony Montana accent. So he becomes the avatar of a kind of like rebellion and renegadeism, right? And people, you can't deny this. Like, it's fucking real, right? Like, it is the truth objectively. The other thing, though, and you're right, Hiram, is that it becomes the popular Latin American understanding of, and Latin American male, like machismo. Because Martin Bregman in an interview said, what I really wanted was to tap into that Latin American machismo. He says this in quote, right? I'm not making this shit up. That's what they want. They want, and how that machismo kind of vibes out. He didn't say with money when they meet capital. He said literally, I want to capture that. So that's kind of how they do it. And that's their interest. And their interest is using that to explore whatever kind of, honestly, not well-studied thoughts around capital that they have. I mean, so like those famous lines, I used to have homies used to say this line. I thought it was cool. Like, I kill a communist for fun, but for a green card, I'm going to carve them up real nice. Homie used to say that. And like, look, if you say that in repetition in your head and you don't know nothing about communism, You know, like what kind of
Yeah.
perspective are you getting? You like, yo, man, especially when you're identifying with Tony and you're identifying with, you know, his kind of drive, you're seeing that as like people who need to get it, right? And also the irony of them being like libertad. You're like, you know, I'm like, yeah,
Well,
I'm gonna
also-
push you. Go ahead.
Also, Tony didn't carve him up. Tony poked him one time. Tony poked him one time and then let him. So again, Tony's lying. Because throughout the movie, all Tony does is just lie and bullshit and brags on stuff that he ain't gonna do. And he's like, I'm gonna carve him up. Really, you're a liar. You poked him one time. The man was like 70 something already. You know what I'm saying? He probably wasn't gonna survive the food in that camp, let alone your stabbing, but whatever. Right. And then I'm like, yo, I'm looking at everything else on the floor, dead. And I'm like, where's the carving? There's no carving.
Yeah, you could have pushed with a banger and he would have died. Dude was so shook.
Like you could have just isolated Revenga in that camp for like a few days and he would have died. There's, you know, not to be ageist and that, but a tent city under I-95 for those of y'all who live on the East Coast, right? That ain't nobody surviving that.
All right, so the next scene that you get, they're now working in like basically like a food truck, essentially, like a small spot, right, that sells Cuban sandwiches, essentially, because they've got their green cards now. Like that's the thing, they get the green cards in exchange for the assassination of the communists. And you know, Tony's pissed. He washes like 2 dishes, and he's like, "I didn't come to the United States to break my fucking back," you know. There's when does the baggage handlers line? Because that one, that comes. Is that in that scene?
When he talks to F. Mary Abraham, so that's
right.
who comes in, right? And F. Mary Abraham, for many people know, Amadeus. So there's another interesting thing about this movie is you really see a kind of locus of actors from New York who are part of like New York theater, and like this is something that I could talk about it in a much bigger way at a different time, who are like given a lot more political. Like the one thing about Pacino that I didn't mention is there was a time that Pacino was given a kind of like political like inclination because of his interest in like Brecht, right? He
Dog
did
Day Afternoon too, like yeah.
Afternoon, Serpico. He financially supported the Living Theater. People know who that is. They were an anarchist group. I actually have talked with one of the members within our gigs, Paul McIsaac, who worked with them, right? So he was kind of given this kind of thing. And people like F. Murray Abraham is also kind of in there. I used to see him a lot when I was doing a lot of theater downtown in the 90s and the aughts. He'd be there, him and Mark Margolis, who's also in the film. Alberto, who will talk about the assassin who's supposed to kill the people. He's another one I used to see all the time in like downtown theater stuff. So you're seeing this also like mixture of people, you know, who kind of come from this like interesting world within New York. And like they all have really chaotic politics. And the reason why I say they have chaotic politics is like they see themselves as like social critics, but they don't really question the money that they be making and their position within the totality of Imperial movie making. They do not, right? So I'll just say that. But yeah, the baggage handlers line. So Tony and Manolo, they get out, right? And they're working in a little like outpost or like, you know, food outpost, right? And you know they're doing their oogling, right? Oh, look at her, she's beautiful. You know, man.
But again, that very like stereotypical Latino thing, right? Like they want the gaudy jewelry, they want the flat. They aspire to be very flashy and womanizers, like an uncontrollable. It's an uncontrollable lust, right? Like they have to bag everybody because it's just natural, right? It's just natural. It's just natural. They're just out here breathing, right?
Like that's all Manny wants, right? He can't, and Tony even says it. You can't even keep your mind on stuff, right? So he's looking at that,
and he can't.
And he can't. So you get the whole thing where they've done this job. They're kind of waiting on the person to come, right? And they do like a cut that like supposed to like do like a kind of like a time jump, where then the car comes up and it's F. Murray Abraham and this other guy, and they have another job for him. and this is like that line, like the whole line. Baggage
It
handlers.
was Omar Suarez. Was his
Omar
name.
Suarez, which like
Omar
F. Murray
Suarez.
Abraham. What is F. Murray Abraham's lineage? I always forget.
It's got to be Jewish, right?
Yeah, but I think he's from. I think is he Syrian? I can't remember where he's from, like originally. And I tried to look up why they named him Omar and all that. Yep, he's Syrian. Yeah. 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 So, or Syrian.
And I'm wrong. He's Orthodox Christian, so I'm wrong. He's not
right.
Jewish.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So he you know, this is like the sequence. So Omar's the guy who basically did the Rebenga hit, got them to do the Rebenga hit, right? And they go in, and he's like, "I got another thing for you, you know," and it's where Tony starts getting, and people love this scene. You know, who are we? Baggage handlers, right? Which Raekwon sample. He has a track called Baggage Handlers, right? That's what his joints, Baggage Handlers, and they do the whole, exchange back about, where Tony's like, nah, man, you doing some whack shit. You got to give me more coming off the boat. You see Tony as like the negotiator, right? He's not taking no shit from Omar. And then they basically give them like the bigger job, right? The guy goes, oh, he tells him something on the side, like, oh,
the suicide mission.
The suicide mission, right? They probably going to
get
killed.
But also, real quick, Omar Suarez is coked the hell out in that car. He's not even looking at it. He's like bouncing. There's no music. He's like bopping to some song that's not playing. Is like just gone.
So you want to make big bucks, right? The way he says that line, I always crack the fuck out. You want to make big bucks. I mean, F. Murray Abraham, peace to you and your over New York acting. That's passionate acting when you are playing a Latin. And that's the thing, man. Like, it's that New York acting shit where they, like, whenever they would play a different, like, race, they would, like, add these accoutrements, right? When you're Latin, you have to be passionate. And it's like, bro, bring it down about 5 levels. Right? But it sets them off on like their next, really their first big job outside of being in the encampment. Right? They now are,
And this is a crazy scene. I remember seeing this shit as a kid and being like, holy fuck.
So,
because they go, they go. They're supposed to, they mention that it's with the Colombians, right? And I guess like Tony makes a little bit of face. Manolo asks him afterwards, like, what was that face? I hate the fucking Colombians, right? And so they go and they have some money, right? But they're doing it because they're going to get $5,000, which is like a huge amount of money to them at this point. And so they go, Tony goes in first. Manolo hangs back.
Real quick.
Go
quick,
ahead.
Before that, they're in South Beach, and then that very popular strip of South Beach. I don't know what street that is, right? But it's like the strip in South Beach where all the restaurants and the hotels and stuff, right? But you wouldn't, unless you've been to South Beach, you wouldn't really pick up on it, right? And the only reason I remember that is because if you're on South Beach, they have a placard on the hotel that says this was the hotel where this went down, where the Scarface movie was shown. But to see that strip then, which would be like 1980, 1979, 1980, and what that same strip looks now is crazy, right? Like night and day. That in the movie, there's hardly anybody there. It's the beach, it's old people, it's run down, right? And you see it today, and that's just a rap video, right? It's just that was one of the things that stood out to me, was just wow, like seeing South Beach look like that compared to now.
So my homie told me it's now like a Dwayne Reed CVS.
It's a Dwayne Reed. It's Dwayne Reed, but it's got a plaque on the side of Dwayne Reed said this is where they shot Scarface or whatever. Boom, boom, boom. But I know it as the chainsaw scene. So I'm on the street yelling at the plaque. I'm like, this is the chainsaw. This is what it. And folks are just like walking by, like, what is a Dwayne Reed? What are you talking about? But I'm like, yo, bad shit happened in this building. Like, you don't understand the fucking Colombians, right? Like, I'm just yelling at a placard, the fucking Colombians. And folks are like, what do the Colombians got to do with a Dwayne Reed? I'm like, never mind. Let's just.
So, yeah, I mean, like, Stone says he got this from a paper. He said not like specifically, but he got the whole chainsaw thing from something he got from the U.S. attorneys. They basically would just give him all the different cases, and they'll let him read it and through everything, which is also like part of, to me, exposing he's getting all the stories of this stuff from U.S. attorneys, mind. So we have to also say this movie does come largely from the mind of U.S. attorneys through the coked funneled mind of Oliver Stone. So let's just like put that, and then directed with violence in the beautiful picture by Brian De Palma. Yeah, I mean, and one of the things De Palma had said in an interview, he was thinking about this scene. He was like, yeah, the thing about it is, the old gangster times, yeah, they were shooting, the old gangster movies, but, the violence now is just another level, right? The violence of drugs and it's just another level. So I really wanted to like turn up the temperature of the level of all of this. And like, if you can't see the racist bullshit in that, like, look, man, you don't think that like Italian gangsters weren't out there doing some of the most heinous shit to people, right? Come on, dude, stop that. That's just BS, right? It's the fact that these like degraded people from the periphery are coming in. They don't have American values, and they're just running amok, acting like wild people. It's Texas Chainsaw Massacre in the streets.
Those Colombians in the 80s were wild, grimy though. Like they were not all Colombians, right? Those cartels, those Medellin, those like. They were into some shit.
I bet, but like, look, man, I'm gonna say it. Like, look, I had family who worked with Italian gangsters who were zoot suit people here in New York, and the stories that I've heard from my family, they equal.
Yeah.
Where they found people, it ain't different.
Yeah.
Interestingly, just to make a note on and we'll talk about this more as it goes through, but like the kind of logic of this kind of filmmaking too. So the original Scarface, to get to the kind of moral point that you were making earlier, Mtume, I think it was the director or the writer, I can't remember exactly, but he said that the goal of the first Scarface, the 1932 one, was to make the government have to respond to what was happening in terms of crime in the country, and to get the citizens of the country to push their government to respond to the type of crime. So it has this very like kind of criminogenic, like we need to push for more law and order because, people are getting, out of hand and wild, and this new money is just cocaine and machine guns and all of that. And I do think that this film also operates on that logic a little bit, for sure. Although I do think it's interesting, and we'll talk about that, I know, like the degree to which we think the embrace of Tony is intended, is unintended, is backlash, is all of that. Because I do think that's kind of interesting. We could talk about that maybe at the end, but because I don't, the reality is, I think whether he's supposed to be the villain or the anti-hero, he's the one that mythologically takes on an importance that goes way, it's interesting in that respect, right? Because it's not told in the way a lot of these movies are, even if it is through the files of U.S. attorneys, you're not given the Elliot Ness character in this film. There is no Fed that you're like, I like that guy. Or I mean, not that we're supposed to, but you're not supposed to identify in that way, which is interesting. But yeah.
I mean, I think that's largely why it's given a pass. But we definitely should dig into that more. I mean, a couple of things about the scene. Go ahead.
Real quick, can I tell a Colombian story? I'm gonna frame it as a Colombian story. Real quick, my connection to the Colombians. My mom, growing up, was an interpreter for the federal court, right? Like that was her job. She was an interpreter and would do translations for folks. Some of the folks who she would have to interpret for were Medellin cartel folks, right? Like the Escobar folks who got arrested somewhere in Connecticut, and they would be brought to New Haven. That's where the federal court was, and she would just interpret. And then after a while, so she came home one time, she was telling us a story, and she was just like, because we're asking her, right? We're little, we're like middle school. And so we're like, are you scared? Are you this and that? She's like, no, they chill. They don't, whatever, you just say whatever, do my job, and that's it. But they liked her, right? And she said they like her because she would, one, she would treat them with respect. She was like the cops, the FBI agents, the folks, and they were always like on some other shit, right? And just really being nasty or whatever. I mean, these were nasty people, but they're both nasty people, right? And she was just kind of like, whatever, I'm just, cool. And then two, that she would say exactly what they were saying. So she was like, they understand English and they know whether you're saying what you're saying is what they said. And most of the time, it's just a lot of nasty shit, right? We're like, what? She's like, they're threatening the judge's life. They're telling them they're going to kill him, kill everybody, right? Because they know they're going to prison. They're caught. They're like, whatever. So they're just saying all kinds of wild shit. And we're like, and you're saying it? She's like, that's my job. I just got to say exactly what they say. And so they were like, yo, they're going to get sentenced. This particular group of them, a couple of them. And they had offered her, they were like, we'll give you a house in Colombia. We'll give, you got children, we'll give them cars or whatever as a gratitude, as a thank you for, being kind and for saying what they said or whatever, this and that. And me and my brother were like, what? We're gonna be rich. We're going to Colombia. We can get a car. We're like 10, 9, 10. We're like, whoa, we're gonna get cars, drive around. We're gonna be the only 12-year-olds driving around New Haven, Connecticut, because Mom got the hookup with the. And she was like, hell fucking no. She was like, absolutely not. She's like, what'd you tell them? She's like, I didn't tell them shit. I just, fucking walked out. And she was like, that is a federal crime. She was like, I would be if I take a pencil from them, I'd be in prison. But for a brief moment, about 10, 12 years old, my brother and I were hype as shit, right? That my mom's hookups with the Colombian cartel was going to mean we were going to be driving around New Haven, Connecticut in Volvos or whatever at 12 years old. And she was like, get the hell out of my face and go to your room, go do your homework. That was a brief connection with the Colombians in my family.
And that's the ideology of Scarface right there in a nutshell.
Right there. It works. See, it works, right? So a couple other things that add us for the scene, and we can go to the next one, is I also think like it's how they want to show Tony. He's fearless, so he executes the dude in the street, right? Which I think also adds to the idea of, of like the violence in the streets of the cities. And of course, the famous thing is, don't forget the yayo, right? The fact that, Tony's doing all this, right? He's doing all this, but it's like the great, or like on the phone, he's like, do you have the cash? Yeah, I have the cash. I also have the yayo. You have the yayo? On the phone? He goes, you have the yayo? It's like,
remember, it was Chichi.
It was Chichi. Chichi, don't forget the yayo. Oh man! So
never mind your man's chopped up in a tub. Like never mind.
We even say
saw your man's
like they pull out the
sliced like deli meat in a tub. Like he's still there.
Forget about that. You got to get the yayo, man. I mean, he does invoke it with Frank later. His friend got killed.
But hold on. I don't mean to keep cutting you off. They come in, right? Manolo comes in because remember, homeboy gets chopped up because Manolo couldn't contain his lust. So there's a roller skating bikini mama on tore up South Beach strip, or I almost call it South Street, South Beach, right? So he fucks up and his man gets sliced like deli meat in a tub because Colombians are ruthless like that, which they were, right? That's fact. I'm sure Google AI will probably say something about homeboy who got killed in the bathtub. Manolo comes in. They have the shootout. Manolo's there, but then they're all fighting in the tub, right? And then they're like, everything calms down. Homeboy's like, they're like in the tub. I'm watching. I'm like, isn't the chopped up dude still in the tub though? Like, aren't these folks just standing on their chopped up mans, just kind of be like, okay. Anyway, that's stay with me for a whole movie. He's like, my guy, like y'all was standing on this man's body chunks in a tub talking about Chichi, get the yayo, do all this. I would have been vomiting. Me, I can't be no gangster. I would have walked in and would have started throwing up everywhere. I wouldn't have been able to even function after that.
I mean, it's so violent. Like the chainsaw, the blood spurting all over the window. So like, I think that's what Manolo finally sees is like, wait, that window's like bright red up there now.
Yeah.
the way that Tony is like trying to like get behind the shower curtain, right, to protect his face from the splash. I mean, it's yeah, like you said, the beautiful scenes and throw incredible amount of violence on. I mean, this is an incredibly violent movie. One thing to say is this movie was rated X, I believe, 3 times by the MPAA,
Oh, okay.
and De Palma appealed with somebody else, like the producer or whatever.
No, Bregman.
Yeah.
He brought 4 lawyers and psychological expert witnesses.
Yeah, and I think U.S. attorneys too, or something, because they had people who were connected in with, you know, the drug, like the policing of drug trade or whatever, that verified that everything that happens in the movie is real, basically, or is like based on what it's really like. And then they make the argument that it's actually an anti-drug movie, which again we'll talk about as we go through this. But you know, that's the argument, is that this is to show the nihilism, which it is nihilistic, of the drug trade. But yeah.
So that, you know, helps them get up a level, right? So like the movie is all like, you know, going up the levels, right? You know, they go from, you know, from Cuba to the camp to, you know, to the shop to now to the, you know, now they're able to go to Frank's house because they have the yayo and the money, right? So they have both, right? So Frank needs that, right? And so I've never noticed this about Frank until this time, that Frank is supposed to be Jewish. I just thought he always said like the Jewish jokes as a thing, but you see his necklace, and like he's supposed to be I read more about it. They wanted him to be a Cuban of Sephardic Jewish descent, right? And it was actually stone. And he said, you know, he talked about like the multiculturalism of Cubans and things like that. It was very chaotic. I didn't really understand. The more I think about it, Stone even admits this, the more you realize how much he wrote this on coke. Because even when he like recounts it, he can't even like get his thoughts in like a straight line. So as I think he even has trouble remembering what he did with the movie. I'm like, Oliver, okay, bro. I'm not saying that doesn't exist, but it's like the way he talks about it. Yeah, he has what's it called, like a chai necklace, right? It's supposed to a symbol representing life is what I saw, right? Yeah, and that's played by Robert Loggia, right? Who's Italian with his name. We've seen Robert Loggia in lots of stuff. You know, he's someone who's been in many a movie, in many different types of roles, like Big. It's like you contrast like this with like him in Big, right? Robert Loggia, right? He's just one of those people, right? And yes, he's playing a Cuban, and he has his like generic, you know, Latin accent. One of the interesting things about it, before we get to Michelle, I find is that, you know, him big on talking about loyalty, right? And this idea of being loyal. It's like the big Frank thing, the loving guy, the loyal guy, right? And him preaching that to him, you know, Tony, like, you know, talks about his, you know, friend dying, and he talks about how unfortunate it is. The other thing, and I'll be curious how y'all caught this too, is the fact that because he says he admits he killed Rebenga. So like the fact that these all these guys hate communists, right? And like, and I found that interesting. Like, you know, I wonder if this was one of the things that maybe, you know, wanted to be explored. I'm not saying Lumet would have done it well, but he wanted to explore the kind of like political connections of like the mob with like, you know, communists and the political. Whether his read would have been good, who knows? I doubt it. It wouldn't have gone by any kind of like liberal limitations. But I found that interesting, like putting that kind of in there, that like this gangster, like he wanted to murder. So, okay. That was something that he wanted to do. Hiram, you were going to say something?
Yeah, no. I have a book. I don't have it near me, but I have a book. When I went to Cuba, I was in Cuba in March. I was in Cuba in March, and was at a book reading where this investigative journalist in Cuba wrote a book on the Rubios, especially Marco Rubio, right? And where Marco Rubio comes from, and ties it all the way back to Rubio's family, but ties it all the way back to the Cuban mafia and the Cuban mafia's beginnings, and basically their control of businesses, their control of like newspapers, media, or right, that Marco Rubio is a part of a decades long plan and set of moves by the Cuban mafia, always aimed back at Fidel, right, and the Cuban Revolution, to be able to get back in there to control that and make Cuba the island paradise for gangsters and all that, what it was before, right? It's a short book, but it's very powerful, but it speaks to this. So that's what I was thinking of when Frank comes up, right? Because Frank is a gangster. Frank is a refugee who did illegal shit, who then has these sort of like ways of influencing politics. He's got the detective who's his boy, and all of it is with an eye back against the Cuban Revolution, hence his beef with Revenga and trying to get back at any of Fidel's closest people, right? And so that tracks heavily with how this whole thing, how we get Marco Rubio, how all this stuff is happening with Cubans, tied back to these, not necessarily Marielitos, right? But like those Cuban exiles who came, were definitely a part of all kinds of stuff, but also inside legitimate business, running as a mafia, building up the power to then do what they do. As seen in Frank, when Frank is talking to Tony, right? And he's like, in his office, there's portraits, there's 5 portraits behind it. It's John F. Kennedy, it's Robert Kennedy, it's a picture of Nixon and I think Johnson, it's LBJ and Richard Nixon. All of those portraits together are sitting behind Frank, right, at his desk, which is like also very quintessential, like folks who had deep ties both to the Cuban mafia and interest in what was happening in Cuba at the time, right? The Kennedys and the Bay of Pigs, Nixon and all these folks, right? Lyndon, like all these folks, and all the CIA assassination attempts against Fidel. And so to have this mafia guy talk about, whatever, tracks very much. And so when we see Marco Rubio, what you're seeing is the climax or the epitome, right, of where this Cuban mafia machine, the original Scarfaces, if you will, had Tony kept his, like, had Frank not messed with Tony, because that's a whole other thing, right? Like, had Frank not messed with Tony and just tossed him to the side and never let Tony in, Frank would have been these guys, and the book names, I don't know their names off the top of my head, right? These guys who eventually created Marco Rubio, these guys who eventually have financed everything that we're seeing now happening to the Cuban people. That would have been Frank Lopez. But instead, Frank gets caught up with Tony, and then Tony ultimately undermines him, betrays him from day one. Because once Frank's wife comes out, in comes that Latino drive, that Latino lust. Coño, Tony, you see that? Oh my God, look at her, man. Oh my gosh, she's so beautiful. Oh, right? Like, it's not like that, y'all. It's not like that. We can control it. I promise we can control it.
Yeah,
but all I mean to say is that Frank Lopez is the Frank Lopez's in real life are the people who built the power and the empire enough to bring about Marco Rubio, who is tied directly by family and himself to the Cuban mafia.
Yeah, so the family might be this family, the Fanuels. I don't know how you pronounce that, but they're worth more than $8 billion, and they were. I mean, it's interesting. This piece particularly doesn't talk about the mob connections, although I'm sure there were, but there were also like sugar plantation owners basically as well.
This is the book right here.
Oh, snap. And
so they're trying to get it printed in English. They're trying to get a US publication to print it, but it's basically Rubio, an incontrollable liar. It's like it's like a liar, right? But it just tracks. It's just the whole story of basically the original Scarfaces and their ties to Marco Rubio.
So the perfect timing. So the next sequence you see is like, so they start talking about, the Frank's, lady is a famous line. You got to get her in between. That famous line that people always all reference all the damn time. I hear that damn line. It's very nasty, right? So you see the shot of Tony sitting down on like the big chairs, and you look up and you see Michelle Pfeiffer, Elvira, coming down the elevator. One thing I didn't mention is like the shooting of this movie. It's interesting, and the cinematographer talked about it. They shot the film largely, if you think about it, in medium close, right? And wides, and various wides, right? And he said the idea with the medium closes were the things that they have things that were like very visceral, or like, and you need to like identify. So like the chainsaw sequence being right up on you, right? So you could basically really feel like the super violence, or before Tony, someone shoots someone, you always get like his rage face, or the bullets really being up close from like Frank or the chainsaw people, all those, right? But then the wide shots to show like grandiose things. And it's interesting, things of reverence are usually done in wides, right? So when you see Elvira, you don't see her close up. You see her within the elevator, the glass elevator coming down, the music, Tony's still wide, right? So it's not just her, it's her within the context that she is, right? And it is, we have to also point out that like, other than Gina, who will later get with Manolo, they're all white women, and largely often blonde white women that they're like, oogling over, right? So this idea of the white American woman being the kind of, transportation into the newer kind of American dream stuff. So yeah, Tony is the other thing to say is this movie is largely using Shakespearean style narrative. The kind of like feudal kind of relationship, like Macbeth, right? You betray the person, you take it, and then you get their spoils, which is their women. But like much of the critics of Shakespeare, the women characters are only about being spoils. They're not very well developed, right? If they have any kind of like motivation, they're always connected to men, or they have a constriction is like connected to the men. But it's like they and I think people like Stone, in their very limited kind of Western canon thinking, they think that they're being kind of like showing how men control women and stuff like that. But actually, it has no real kind of depth in exploring the women, the life of women in stuff. So it's very much, it's just part of how they did, and a lot of it comes from Shakespeare. Like, it's funny, someone I think mentioned like Richard III. One of the big criticisms of Richard III is how it situates how him and the women like Lady Anne and all that. She doesn't really have a character. She's just there to kind of show Richard's ambitions and his falls and all that type of shit, which is very typical of like Shakespearean stuff. So yeah, that becomes largely how Elvira is. And this is Michelle Pfeiffer's like first, I think if it's her first, I think it's her first, is it her first role ever in a movie? And I think she might have done a TV movie. If not, it's her first, like, definitely her first big role, or role with like any kind of weight in it. But like, it's very early in her career, and definitely helps cement her as like an up and coming, and then later becoming star.
The character was from Baltimore. She was from Baltimore.
I know.
I was hoping she would have a Baltimore accent. You know what I'm saying? It's like she really from Baltimore, but she didn't have the
Grease 2. Right.
Yeah.
Which I've never seen.
No, and we'll never. Fuck that. I hate Grease so much. Sorry. But she was in she was in some TV movies, and then it looks like Grease 2, and then this. But you're right, this was like her breakout role.
So now we get to where they so where are we going, Tony? The Babylon Club. The Babylon Club. Reese, like, and then like, so I ain't gonna lie. When I used to watch scenes from Scarface all the time, sometimes I would just throw the Babylon Club scene in. That shit is like rush to the yayo. Rush to the yayo. It's oh man, this shit is hilarious. Like, you see it, all the people. I will give them lots of credit for designing that scene, right? Oh, there's also a funny comment about that. So the cinematographer was like, De Palma goes, "Oh yeah, so we got the place that we're gonna shoot it. Is our mirrors okay?" The cinematographer was like, sure. He says, I walk up in there and there's mirrors everywhere. And then he says, I go to De Palma and I'm like, how many cameras are we using? He's like, 5. Dude is like, you killing me, man. Like, the cinematographer said he was pissed. He said they ended up having to shoot like, a few more days than they wanted, which is also kind of shows this movie is very excessive. It was like an excessively made movie, which is definitely falls into the excessive expression, and Tony's excessive. So this movie is all about, excess, which I think Elvira has a later line about something excels or something succeeds like excess or something like that. She says later. But yeah, we in the Babylon Club, right? Which is, I don't know what folks want to say about the Babylon Club, but yeah, man, 80s club, cocaine, sex, 80s music, Latin men and white women.
Yeah, there it is. That's the move.
She's on fire.
Right. She learned those moves in Baltimore. She didn't get those in Miami. She came from Baltimore with that jiggle yang she's doing.
And Tony just jumping like a rabbit, like
yeah, he's all off beat. She's just like, doing her thing because she's always in the Babylon. Remember, Tony's coming from Cuba. They don't got no music in Cuba because them communists. So he don't know how to dance. So she's coming from Baltimore doing the
no rhythm in Cuba at all.
The two-step from Baltimore, and just. But it looks like the club. It looks like the club where Carlito met Benny Blanco in Carlito's Way, right? Because they had that same scene where because they go to Ron's club. Used to be Sasso. Now they call him Ron.
Run for Ronaldo, right? Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, a couple of things with
funny accents in that movie too. That was
I mean, I can't really get into that, but actually, because I met Edwin Torres who wrote it, and I had a couple of long conversations with Edwin, but we don't want to. I can't take that side story right now. But yeah. So you see him trying to bring him under his wing, Frank, right? And Tony. There's like the famous 2 lines, that you hear. Don't underestimate the other guy's greed, right? That line, or don't get high on your own supply, which has been in every damn rap
10
song.
crack commandments.
Oh, right. He was giving them the commandments.
Commandments, right? He also introduces him to all the different drug dealers, right? This is when he first says the line of the Yiddish line, right? Yeah, the I forgot what it was.
Well, that's the one. Yeah, I can't remember what he says. Yeah. He talking about the guy, the fat guy. Is like
El Gordo.
Yeah.
There's and Hiram, I wonder how you feel. There's also these moments that my brain can't ever adjust. It's like when I see 2 people whose natural language is supposed to be Spanish and they speak in English. my sense of disbelief just gets broken when I'm watching the movie. I'm like, why y'all talking in English? Shouldn't y'all be talking in Spanish?
The part that annoys me is when, like, the movies always they mess up the Spanglish, right? And so so aside from being very passionate, right, in all these like movies where like the Latino actors always have to be very passionate, you see it in Chicano movies too, like Blood In, Blood Out, or whatever. There's always at some moment they're gonna be doing this, right? It's like we don't do that, at least not in that kind of way. But there's also this thing where you have to mix the Spanish and English in this way that we just don't do. That's not natural. So when Tony's talking to his mom or whatever, it's like, Tony, you're coming here after all these years. I don't see you. You are breaking my corazón. Our moms don't talk to us like that. Like there's not gonna be some random. It doesn't do that, right? Disney movies, if there's Latino kid, there's always gonna be some random Spanish word thrown in there, like, you know what I'm saying? I hate that. So Tony's mom does that. So more so than that, the part that irks me is when they start doing shit like that. If there's like the people who aren't strong English speakers, they like talking, but then there's like a Spanish word to hold you to your culture. You know what I'm saying?
You know where they do
Never
that a lot?
forget your cultura.
You know where they do that? La
You keep talking
Bamba.
English,
La
bro.
Bamba. They do that all the time. La Bamba, the mom. She always has like that one like word.
It's all
She'll
right.
add
You'll be talking
Spanish.
regular. Like I said, you're talking regular. And he's out here talking, but don't you ever forget your cultura. Bro, it doesn't work like that. Like that's not how you that's not I hate that shit.
There's also a couple of lines we skipped over that just I'll reference just for reference sake, which is like he says, I want what's coming to me, right? And it's like, what's that? He said, the world, Chico, and everything in it, right?
World, Chico. Yeah.
Nas, of course, uses that line. And then the money, the whole sequence around money, power, women, right? And the way that it, like, first you get the money, then you get the power, then you get the women, right? And it's, again, locks, money, power, respect, right? So it's just, I just brought those up because there's so many lines like that within the movie. Yeah.
The other one coming out of that scene when they're driving, he like, she like me, man. And like, how'd you know she like you? The eyes, Chico. They never lie. Which I never understood. Heard people say that all the time. The lies, Chico. They never lie. I'm like, shut the fuck up. What are we talking about? I can't tell shit like people's eyes. Like the lies, Chico. And I watched the movie again, knowing that part's coming out. I said, let me look at her eyes. I still couldn't tell where he found. He was like, oh, she like me, man. I can't tell. You know what I mean? Like, this woman looks like she's disgusted by you.
And that's the thing.
Dishwasher.
And that's the other male. You're sorry. That's like the other male fantasy, right? Like the woman who's basically got a man. She ain't got time for you. She wants to go dance because her man is too coked up and drunk to dance. She's like, well, at least you'll go down and come down and dance a little bit. That secretly means she wants you to like throw her dress up and like to start, get it, or just go after her with all the strength of your heart. And it's part of that conquest idea that exists, right? So like when he's talking to her, right? When she's like, baby, don't call me baby. Now you're talking to me, baby. That I like, right? Like that real,
that Latino shit. That because we like that. We like them aggressive being yelled at and being, you know what I'm saying?
When the woman gets aggressive.
Those are stereotypes. We don't like that all the time. I'm just like, what do you see in her eyes? Shorty is just as coked up as her man is. Her eyes are probably dilated as fuck. Like, what are you talking about? It's in the eyes, Chico. Mind you, your man is also passed out. He can't hear nothing either, right? He's barely making it.
So anything before? So they go to Cochabamba, right? They go to Bolivia. Yeah. Do you have anything before that? Yeah.
Oh, Bolivia. Yeah, we know. I think we have a lot more before that. He has like mom. Right?
Yeah, because he finally went to his mom because he made it, right? He's coming with his suit, he's coming with his money, he sees his sister. Yeah, his mom is still like, I still hate you.
He also steps up. Before that, he also tries to impress Elvira again. You have like the car sequence with like he picks her up and like she makes fun of his ugly ass car, right? And like, he goes to like show her, she's like, oh, you're trying to impress all the ladies. Like, maybe some lady tiger, right? He's like doing all the like stuff. He tries to kiss her, right? Puts on the hat. And like, that's also kind of corny.
That was after the scene with the tongue. Remember? Because they were like at the pool.
At the beach.
Pool, and he was like, American women, they go crazy. They can't do it with the tongue. They can't. He's like, you look like a lizard, man. Put that away.
You have that, and like she tells him about like the banana boat and all that type of stuff, and like she's like constantly kind of going at him, Elvira, right? She doesn't mess with the help is what she says. But then I think the important scene before Sosa is when he goes to see his mom, and it introduces Gina as well. So you see Tony come in, right? And you go in there, and like there's like a little humble house, and he goes in and he's in his suit, right? And he has like gifts for him, and like there's like the mom, and immediately the mom is like, she's looking at him with like the stern face of like she's not really happy to see him. And then you see Mary Elizabeth Mastrantonio, Gina, she's like, and like I thought, I was like, oh, the separated families. Oh, what communism the politics of the world has separated families, and like the humanitarian heartstrings, you hear it, in the music. It's very corny and like reductive. Not saying it doesn't happen, but the way they kind of frame it, right? And one of the funny things is like, so he goes into when Tony comes in, right? He's in there, and she's like, well, "What have you been doing?" He says, "Your mom is, I've been a success, right? You don't need to work." He says, "What do you work for?" An anti-Castro group. And he's like a political organizer.
Political organizer.
It's like cracking the fuck. I think, and this is where I give Pacino credit. Like at times, like he knows some things are like bullshit, and the way he kind of sits, he goes, I work for an anti-Castro group." like no one believes that shit, homie. Right? He plays it well in that kind of way where it's just all BS, right? And of course, the mom don't fuck with him. She hates him because and like, I don't know. I have one thing to say about it. The thing that I've never liked about this stuff, and this is something that I've from firsthand, is a lot of my homies who struggle with street shit and have bad relationships with their parents. They would eventually kind of develop this ideology that's like attached to like the mom, that I ain't shit, and that it's like some kind of like metaphysical happening, so that they end up like kind of taking it on. Where I think this is where Tony Montana becomes someone that they identify with. Right? Yeah, I ain't shit. I never was going to be shit. Like it's like predestined. And when I watch this scene, I think about that a lot. A lot of my homies who went through that kind of like emotional stuff, and when they were at that fault line, right, where they couldn't get a more like social read, and how these movies don't provide that, right? It just kind of helps indoctrinate within you this kind of like negative kind of self, reflection. So at the end, really, what is your destiny at the end? Blaze of glory, with machine guns. That will be
Bishop and Juice.
Bishop and Juice.
Bishop and Juice uses that same line when he's pressing Q, right? Like, you ain't shit, you ain't never gonna be. It was that same thing.
Juice. Anything else? Anything else from that sequence? Anybody?
Just you get Gina's introduction too, right?
Yeah, and Manny getting the Google eyes for her. So they set that up early, right? Because Gina still wants to stay connected. He gives her like the money, like, give it to mom every now and then. You have another, the communists control everything about you line from Tony, and then you see Manolo like, the Google eyes for
Elvira was interesting, right? Because Elvira, because I don't think she was even Latina in the movie. I think she was just straight up Elvira, from Baltimore. She was interesting because she's on one end is kind of like this trophy wife, trophy girlfriend or whatever, who's all she does is just snort cocaine and dance or whatever. But she knows the game, right? Because she's telling the commandments with Frank. She's spitting the commandments with Frank. She keeps this very like hardline, even where Frank is at times seen as soft or too weak or too trusting. Definitely too trusting of Tony, because Tony from the rip wants to undermine and wants to take over, right? So he's on a dance floor and he's talking, and she's like, "Yo, I'm Frank or whatever." And he says something like Frank's weak or Frank's a coward or something like that or whatever. She doesn't say nothing to Frank, right? She kind of keeps that to herself. She knows, and she plays along, right? So she's going and she knows what Tony's trying to do, and she like plays along all the way up until she becomes Tony. But throughout the movie, there's always this sort of like, she has her own self-interest, but she's not just this bubblehead kind of like just trophy thing. Like, she plays her own sort of game, and she can see where the tides are moving, right? And places her bets or whatever. I don't doubt it. I don't doubt it. She I'm sure had she survived, if she had survived, she'd probably be in The Wire too, because she's coming from Baltimore down to Miami with that game, right? And she was giving game to Tony. Right? And so she's presented as this thing, but like Elvira was playing her own game, her own game as well.
So someone also mentioned it. The other thing, as I said about the Google eyes, and she says, yeah, they both seem to have Google eyes for Gina. So yeah, that's another thing. So about the whole kind of Tony's obsession over Gina. And I find it so interesting because I'm sorry, I don't think there's anyone who has watched this movie and has not said it feels incestuous, right? And it feels like, but there's a refusal on De Palma, Stone, all of them to ever even suggest that's what it is. They go with the Manny line that it's like purity, that Gina's pure, and it's all about the purity. And I'm like, come on, y'all. It's either y'all don't realize the own shit that y'all like developing within your like pseudo Freudian psychology shit, or you just don't want to say it outright.
I mean, they realize it because of the scene at the end with her. Like, you know, I mean, we'll get to that, but yeah, I mean,
Right.
it's like it's in the film. It's not subtle, you know.
It's like, come on, yeah, stop it, you know.
But it still plays into those stereotypes, right? Of like these hot Latins who always want to just have sex, and at some point we don't even care who we having sex with, just as long as it's you know. I think part of it too, and I think because the movie isn't written by Latinos, it's folks trying to interpret, or their interpretation or understanding of what Latino culture is, right? Is that the way that would play out is that Tony would just become her second father. And a lot of times, even more of an enforcer of the rules and defender of her purity, right, as her brother, than even her own father, who has trained him up as a boy to be the defender of that, right? And so if you talk to Latino women who have brothers, right, a lot of times it's fighting that I got to fight my dad. And then these motherfuckers who think they're also my dad too, and I can't breathe, I can't do nothing, right? Because these guard dogs are. But when you have other folks writing about this, then it takes on this other through their own lens too, right? And their own understanding of what Latina women represent, or maybe their own desires for this idea of what some hot-blooded Latina woman who's down to go into the stalls, down to for whatever, down to shoot you too, right? What that means and what that looks like to them. Because I saw it as both. I saw it as like, yeah, there's this like overprotective, you're her second father, you are the defender of her, you know, her purity and all that stuff. And then there's also this gaze of like non-Latino folks towards Latina women, where they're just these hypersexualized, like hot, spicy, right? She's gonna give you the best sex of your life, and she's gonna stab you, and you're just gonna love it because you don't know what's coming, which one is coming at any time, but they're both amazing.
So the next sequence, I don't know if you want to dip it, is when we get to Sosa. We get to Bolivia.
I just want to shout out AZ. AZ is one of the least respected. I mean, he's respected by people who respect him, but he doesn't have the career of his peers necessarily. And yeah, Sosa obviously was his nickname within the firm and everything else.
And then the Immortal Technique track, Peruvia Cocaine, uses that.
Yep.
That sample, another Scarface sample that is used.
I mean, just another point to make is that, you know, I never understood, like, you know, Cochabamba, right, in Bolivia is where they set this, which I think is also very interesting. I mean, this is also where Evo Morales is from, right? And, you know, a lot of the indigenous support for the movement for socialism in Bolivia comes out of that area. And so, you know, I don't doubt, and I don't know, Hiram, if you know, I mean, I know that the coca plant is very big there. And, you know, it's interesting, right? Because he's supposed to be our, what's the name of the dude from Colombia, like Medellin? What's that?
Pablo?
Yeah, Pablo Escobar, right? Like he's kind of the Pablo Escobar figure of this movie. And so, yeah, you go there, lives lavish, huge, you know, palace basically that he's living in. He's the real big money in the film. And he's the supplier basically, right? And so, you know, Tony's there with him along with F. Murray Abraham's character. I forgot his name. And they're supposed to make a deal basically on behalf of Frank. And Tony does this, you know, his thing in any negotiation. Tony always goes hard, right? He's like, trying to get a better number, trying to make a better deal.
Yes.
And they end up, I mean, the memorable part of the scene obviously is the helicopter.
Right.
You
Yeah.
know, yeah, go ahead.
The one thing it'd be cool. I don't know if I'm sure somebody has done it online, some sort of like power chart or power map or whatever, because Sosa is the big guy, right, in Bolivia, but Frank Gomez is scared of Gaspar Gomez and the Diaz brothers, who we never meet. Right? They're always talking about the Diaz, you know, like doing the Diaz brothers, and then Tony's like, "Fuck the Diaz brothers! I bury them like cockroaches."
Yeah,
right?
because they're
But we never meet them. We don't know.
And Frank mentions that they're distributors,
Right? Who work for Gaspar Gomez, but I don't know who Gaspar Gomez. So in this whole sort of like network, they're scared. Frank is scared of the Diaz. I mean, he's scared of Sosa, but he's scared of the Diaz brothers and Gaspar Gomez. But we never meet them and don't know how they connect to Sosa.
Yeah, like I always see that like it's like there's like some kind of competitor thing, right? And Frank's a pragmatist in that kind of way, right? Like you don't get too big, right? You keep it at a level. Like Sosa is like this like large. I mean, he's empire. And what's interesting, I think, is important. I think for people who didn't grow up in those times, I experienced, especially when the Soviet Union fell, you didn't think about nations. You thought about like drug dealers as empires, right? They were like the feudal lords, right? Right. So you seeing Sosa in this, like, and they call him a wealthy landowner, right? He's supposed to be like the new feudal lord, the real like power, like, you know, like political power is like a whole other thing. They even later make sure to have the one like American US governmental representative. But yeah, like I think like even not even having Gaspar Gomez and the Diaz brothers, right? That's like you can't see them. Like they're so big, like they're so all encompassing, right? And like the fact that Tony like will later challenge them, fuck Gaspar Gomez and fuck the Diaz brothers, right? Like damn, he don't care, right? And like, and I mean, when we get to that scene, we could talk about it. But like,
real quick, Paul Hurdle dropped it in the chat. The Diaz was gonna bring it up. The Diaz brothers mixtape. You remember the Diaz brothers when Tony touched, right? That was. So my only reference of the Diaz brothers was that because Tony touched and Doo-Wop at the time, who were like in that mixtape era when mixtapes were a thing, right? And Doo-Wop was like. Thought got too, but like Doo-Wop was definitely, and they were the Diaz brothers, right? And they had those Diaz brothers mixtapes, which were like bangers. But it's like no one ever saw the Diaz brothers, right? No one ever saw Gaspar Gomez in the Diaz brothers. Another thing that stood out to me too, and what made me think rewatching the movie, and that scene with Sosa, where Tony is kind of like overstepping his rank, and he's negotiating, right? And Omar Suarez is like. Kind of just letting them, but like, yo, what the fuck? And Tony's just like, I got this. Where Tony's positioning himself to be the man. I'm like, Tony is Alpo, right? So like the paid in full story, or the real story right behind paid in full, but he is Alpo Martinez, right? He is definitely. If there's like a real life kind of Tony Montana, what right? It's Alpo Martinez. And I'm just looking at this like, yo, this dude is Poe. This dude is very much Poe in all of the ways, right? In all of the ways. And so,
I mean, So yeah, I mean, I'm from uptown, so I did all the listening to like the interviews. I did all of it, and it's funny listening to Poe's. Like, you could tell. I'm sure he probably. I wouldn't doubt that he mentioned Tony Montana as a figure directly that it influenced his like thinking. But when you like listen to them talk, you realize that like gangster movies were their archetypes, right? And the nihilism, right? It's like, you know, like there's like that scene in the movie where Cameron. Oh no, there's an interview with Poe where he talks about like just like the death, right? And he talks about it was kind of just what it was. And like, this is what they see. They didn't see it as death. And like, that's the thing about these movies that people, I think, really have to grasp and accept is like, the limit of like your success is being like Tony, being able to walk into Sosa's spot. And I ain't gonna lie, that sequence with him and Omar where he's like chumping Omar and it's dope. Like how it's played, like F. Murray Abraham plays a great chump. No wonder he got Amadeus after this when he played Salieri, right? He plays a he's like, I started you with this business, right? Like when he's trying to like hold it. Sosa's just sitting there looking at him like, the fuck, what's going on here? And Pacino's just punking him. Like it's not even effort. He's just like, I'm making the deal. Like he's like, bro, whatever. You know, you a punk, right? And you could see like they look at Tony in this frame, right? He's up in here, small little dude who comes from the gutter, which a lot of people can relate to. He's dominating a meeting with a guy who runs an empire, right? And it's like, look, if your life goals only can go so far, that's a pretty good archetype to follow, right? Tony Montana, right? And don't be a snitch like Omar.
But also shows that Tony has no like Tony just got no guardrails throughout the whole movie. Tony can't pull it back ever. So even in the bathroom scene, he has no idea that Manolo and Chichi are gonna come up and save him, right? With the Colombians, he's just still right, like he's just constantly pushing it, right? Like Omar Suarez could have shot him outside that little diner shop or whatever for talking crazy, right? Tony's just constantly. So you in Bolivia with Sosa, and you're still just talking. Or he's like, you know, he's telling Sosa about, I don't break my balls, my word for nobody, yada yada yada. You know, I don't lie. Motherfucker, you've been a liar since you got off at fucking the INS station. What are you talking about?
Mm-hmm.
All you do, you lie to your mom, you lie to everybody, right? But the fact that he believes his own shit so much and he's willing to die on that hill, which there's so many people like that, right? Who are like, bro, you are so beyond dumb. It's insane that you are still alive as a human being, how dumb you are, but you're willing to die on every dumb hill because you have no guardrail. You have nothing to say, hey, maybe I shouldn't be doing this. I mean, it gets him to the height of his world pretty fast, but also knocks him off just as fast, right? Because there's no guardrail, there's no filter. He's just flying off pure emotion. I'm sure there's some sort of medical diagnosis for that. I'm not a doctor, I can't do that. But this man is not right? He's just not right because he can't stop himself.
Yeah, and I mean, I think we probably have all known people who have the Tony syndrome, you know, and I think how much, and the people that I knew that were like that, this was their, like, almost like a Bible to them in a certain way, you know, I mean, there's so many, when I lived in New York, one of my roommates, like, there was so many times I was like, I'm going to die today because this fool is just like, what are you doing going 100 miles an hour in the breakdown lane? Like, you know, like, it's just, yeah. So, I mean, there is a thing, I think, in terms of the kind of, and it is fascinating, right? Because I mean, I guess it's sort of like the Icarus thing, right? Flying so close to the sun, like this whole idea, right? Of people who just they're like, yeah, but I'm going to be able to get this success. That's the thing about this movie, is it teaches people, like, yeah, you could talk about the fall, right? But there's the people who buy into that method or that ideology are like, yeah, I'll be able to avoid the fall. Like, that's always the thing that they think. But beyond that, like, they're just like, I want to get that close to the sun. You know what I mean? Like, it is just ultimately that thrill of that and the potential of it, you know, especially I think for people who, you know, like, that's the dream, right? And that's the thing about this movie, is it is the American dream, and they talk about that. Like, that's actually like a tagline for this movie, basically, of him, you know, following the American dream too hard, basically.
You guys think Donald Trump has watched Scarface 1 million times? Or 2 million times? He's definitely watched it. It's just how many times has he watched it?
He probably has it on the back. He probably had a period where he had it on in the background. You know what I'm saying? But then I
Just
think he
funny.
also probably sees himself more like Sosa than he sees himself as Tony. He probably thinks Tony's a bit of a, because remember, Sosa comes from money, right? So like he could be arrogant like that too, right? You know, I think there's that thing he probably sees like, ha, 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 Tony, yeah. So when Sosa kills him, he's like, hey, look, you know, and I'm sure, you know, guess that's some shit, you know. I'm sure he's watched that when you think about the kidnapping Maduro, you know, getting people to kind of come in the fucking
Yeah.
Tony's compound to come take him at the end, right? That's the kind of like, you know, whatever Radhika Desai call it, politics is spectacle, right? When she said in your interview, right? Like that's like that kind of thing that I think really affects the brain. A couple of things in this scene that I think I want to throw is some of those like famous lines. Because the other thing they do try to do with Tony is give him like a moral code where he says, I never fucked anyone who didn't have it coming to him. Right. Like, so like the whole like stop snitching thing. Right. I think you can also connect it to like Omar the Rat. Right. So like the stitches, the law is the worst thing you could do. But Tony's not a rat, though. Right. You know what I'm saying? And that, you know, but you know, he'll kill people in the middle of the street, but he's not a rat. So he has a certain moral code, right? You know, all I have in this world is my balls and my word. You know, he's tough. You know, make a move. He stands up to Sosa, and it's also funny because Sosa's so fucking tall, and he got short ass Pacino doing his, you know, his hand thing with him. You know, they frame it pretty good, right? And then of course the famous, you know, Sosa line. You know, don't ever fuck me. You know, like, you know, don't ever fuck me, Tony. You know, and it's funny because that's the one time you do see Tony a little scared. He's like,
you know what was crazy too is that he gets the call, right? The hitman gets the call. He calls Sosa over. They're like, oh, and he points at him, right? So clearly they're talking about you. They're like, no, it's all good. It's all good. Omar Suarez is being let out. He's like, Tony, you stay here. And Tony's like, yeah. I'm gonna stay here. Fuck off, little man. Big dogs will start talking. They walk, right? They stop. They talk a little bit, and then Sosa pulls out the binoculars and shows, and Omar Suarez is in the helicopter, but he is beat to dog shit, right? And I'm like, how did they beat that man so bad and tear up all his clothes in what would have been about 2 minutes, 3 minutes? You know what I mean? Like 3 minutes of the most heinous ass whooping this man has probably ever taken. His clothes
that's so
ripped, his suit is all ripped, right? I was like, that's wild, but cool. I wanted to see that. I was like, that is the fastest ass whooping I've seen. I would have seen, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that's Alberto the Shadow, right? He comes back. This is the hitman that
played by Mark Margolis. Yeah. So the next what's the next sequence is so we get the breakup. So they go to he goes to Frank's office, right? You know, and they have Frank's pissed that, you know, he's made this deal. Pacino sitting there, right, you know, in the chair, you know, he's like, you know, what are you gonna do when we can't make up the money? I go on the street for you, you know, like, you know, and Tony implies he's been making his own deals, and then you get the big, and it's funny because this sequence is very famous among rap people too, because they sampled it for Fast Life. Right, where he goes, fuck Casper Gomez, fuck the DF. We got to expand the operation. And I've seen RZA say this, that sequence was part of their thinking about Wu-Tang, right? Taking over. So like this idea that, you know, in the 90s of this like capitalist takeover, and they were like likening it to like drug dealing and like drug empires, right? Rockefeller, the Wu-Tang expansion, this idea that they were doing some kind of massive like hostile takeover of the music industry, which is like such bullshit, and something I believed in when I was 15. I really bought into it, that like black folk were out there, you know, conquering the music industry, like Tony Montana and Michael Corleone and so forth, or Nino Brown, who's another person that comes directly from the Scarface lineage, right? So like using that sequence, and yeah, he gets, you know, him and Frank break up in this sequence. You know, Frank, you know, pretty much tells him, you know, they don't like say, you know, they're about to break up. after that he doesn't want to do it. He wants him to stall the deal, and kind of Frank and Tony moves on, which then gets you right to Frank, right to Tony going right to Elvira, and basically coming to the crib. Says, she's like Tiger, which another line that people say all the fucking time. She's like you're like a tiger. I want you to be the mother of my kids and all that type of shit, right? I also find like that it's also that male bullshit, like the fact that he'll roll up in there, he'd be like, make me a drink, right? If you're domineering enough, you can get a woman to do what you want, right? Like if he totally like dominates her, and it's not seen as fucking problematic in any kind of way. It's seen as like an ideal, right? Like Tony's that good, right? He can get a beautiful woman who's like even taller than him to like do what the fuck he wants, right? Tony's a badass in that kind of way, and yeah, so you have that sequence, which then, and then we get back to the Babylon Club, which kind of wraps us around where they're back at the Babylon Club, and then you have Mel Bernstein, right? Who kind of comes in. He's the first time he's like the first like real law enforcement we see in the movie, and like as a character. He basically
which is hilarious, by the way, because these guys are like like moving millions of dollars of cocaine, and there's like no cops around.
And like he gets it up in there and like is able, he basically does the whole thing. Like, look, you're gonna need he knows all the stuff. He knows about the Rabanga hit. He knows about also the Colombians in the motel, which obviously Frank told him, and then Tony says he realizes that he asked him to be basically his mole within, but it comes with a price, right? And then they have the whole sequence in there where Tony basically tries to kill Elvira. He tries to punk Frank, tests him right there. Balls, talks about balls again, and do you have it? And then Frank goes off because Frank's a pragmatist. He's not going to start no fight here with someone, but Frank got other plans, right? And then you also have Gina, the other part. You have the other Gina thing in the sequence where actually it's the first thing you see is when Tony walks in with Manolo. They see Gina, and she's like with some dude, right? And he basically rolls up into the bathroom stall when she's in the bathroom stall with her. And like, the very like, the movie couldn't go 3 hours without some violence against women. So, it took him 2 hours to do it, but like, full 3 hours, you need a little, you need some violence against women to happen in the movie. I don't know if there's anything from those sequences before we get to the shootout and revenge sequence. I don't know if there's anything there,
It was just clear Frank was an old man in a young man's game.
Yep.
Right. And that was clear. And Frank's like pragmatism, Frank's whatever just wasn't. Yeah. It wasn't useful, right, to hold that kind of thing with Tony trying to crawl his way up and get it the fast way. Right. And so bringing Tony in ultimately just destroyed Frank's whole. That was running cool. He had it. Right? He had, obviously he's an old man. He had it on lock, and Tony came in and just ruined everything.
Fucked up his shit. Yeah.
And I do think there's I know this is the cocaine industry they're talking about, but I do think there's an old money, new money dynamic going on there with Tony and Frank, right? And it's that Frank, is paying off the cops. He has his enterprise sort of working within the confines that basically, the state is cooperating in a certain way with how he's doing that, and Scarface, on the other hand, represents Tony represents the young. And this is a thing very often. I mean, like, there's so many iterations of this. The Wire, right? Like this idea that the new gangster, right, is always the one you have to be like the kids these days, right? It's different than when we were doing it. When we were doing it, we had some form of respect, some kind of code, yada, yada, yada. Like there's a lot of versions of that within the drug trade as well.
For that time period too, I mean, later on, a little later, but right, that's John Gotti and Paul Castellano, right? And the whole Gambino family thing.
Yep. One other thing to mention. One other thing to mention about is is another point on like the incest thing is like when he does like, you know, assault Gina physically is after she talks about she wants to have sex, right? And whoever I want to, I will, right? And there's that like disciplining a woman when she kind of asserts her, you know, her sexuality in any kind of way, right? And doing that. And like, you know, when you're identifying with a character like Tony, and as you're made to identify a character like Tony, and you're given this kind of outlet for that rage through a film, you have to really question what that does to people and how they're kind of situating their kind of own understanding of their own rage. And I don't think it's a good way that they're actually being able to, you know, do it. So yeah, you get to the assassination part. Shout out to Richard Belzer, who's the fucking comedian. People remember Richard Belzer from all the Law and Order, Homicide, Life on the Street, right? He's making his Cuban jokes, right, about, you know, Ricky Ricardo, and it's funny because like it's all white women in the crowd. It's like it's so interesting, right? Like these clubs, and I'd be curious to know someone who hung out in clubs in the '80s like that in Miami. Like I'd be very curious people to get their report on what that stuff was like. And then yeah, you have them try to assassinate him, you know, with like the two gun people, you know, you can't have a gangster film without a big assassination of like the lead character. But of course, Tony's slick, you know, he gets him in the legs, right? You know, he's able to get him, you know, and he escapes the assassination attempt, which then he leads him. He corrals the whole crew, and they roll up onto Frank to do the big famous you know, scene. And one of the things he does, if you remember, is he does like the phone call, the like, I want you to call Frank at this time, just to make sure that he's correct that it was him, because Frank's never gonna admit it. He says, I bet it was, who does he blame it on? The Diaz brothers or somebody? I bet it was the Diaz brothers, right? You know,
the Diaz brothers, always the Diaz brothers.
Always the Diaz brothers, right?
Are they even real? Like, is this just like made up?
I bet it was the Diaz brothers.
I bet it was the Diaz. That's the accent. That was.
But you always have to do that with your accent. You have to make us dance and have a song like that.
I will do it for you,
right?
You know, and but they also really have to do the thing, which will later contrast later, is because once he does the phone call and Frank realizes that, because Bernstein is also there, and that's the thing. Frank has to later admit it that it was him. You know, Frank, you a real piece of shit, right? You know, and he does the whole thing, and like he begs Tony, right? And you know, so like that's something that Tony would never do. He'll never beg for his life. Frank is just, you know, so weak. He'll beg for his life. And Tony, because
Frank even offered his wife, right?
Right,
Elvira,
right.
You want Elvira, right? And so again, the sort of like proper ownership, right? The ownership of the women in the movie. Tony owns Gina. He also wants to own Elvira, right? So part of the empire is also owning all the women, like literally owning all the women inside of that.
Yeah, it's total feudal Shakespeare bullshit, right? And but then of course, you know, what is the famous part, right? Where he goes, you know, I'm not going to kill you, Frank. You know, Manolo, shoot this piece of cheat, right? And he goes and he shoots him, right? And then the Bernstein shot is my favorite though. When he kills Mel. You want to say? Go ahead.
I don't remember what he says, but he's basically like, "I'm a cop. You can't kill me," and he just blasts him, right?
He would say, "You would say like you're never a cop" or something like that, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then another scene where Pacino gets to kill a dirty cop. Remember one of his probably his most famous scenes early in his career is in The Godfather, when he gets to shoot Sterling Hayden in the throat, right? And he says it, yeah, like it, and that's the thing I think that happens with these movies. People can't underestimate how they like connect, right? Corleone, right? You know, his kind of ideology with it, they'll kind of like forklift that to this movie a little bit, you know, in the kind of like thinking, right? But yeah, that shot, you know, when he shoots him and all that. But my favorite part of that scene is, so he shoots Frank. He shoots Bernstein, and it is the other cat, right? And the cat's like sweating, right? And he goes, "What about Ernie?" He goes, and the music goes, and it cuts out. "You want a job?" And Ernie's like, yeah, man, thank you. And then your homie goes over, "Hey, man, you got a job." That shit has
He
me
took
in
that whole
tears.
whiskey bottle, whatever that was, to the face. It's just
Because, hey man, you got a job. It's such, I ain't gonna lie, that's just played perfectly because he's just like,
real quick, the fact like fuck. I'm cursing too much. It's Scarface, so it's got me cursing way too much on the damn podcast than I ever would, right? Frank should have killed Tony a long time ago. Like, this is on Frank. Frank got what Frank deserved because Frank should have killed Tony off rip a long time ago. The amount of insubordination, the amount of crazy stuff that he would let Tony get away with on the regular. So there's that scene where they're talking. He's like, you negotiated a deal for yourself with Sosa, clearly undercutting me. You let them kill Omar Suarez, right? He said Omar Suarez was a snitch. He's like, you believe that? Like, what proof? There was no proof that Omar Suarez was a snitch. He's like, you believe that? You bought that from him? And then he's like leaving. He's like, I'm still the boss. And then Tony's like, can I leave now? Dude should have been popped right there. Dude should have been popped when he got off that plane in Bolivia. Dude should have been popped back at the back. Dude should have been popped so many times, right? But was allowed to keep on, all the way up until the point where then Frank is like begging for his life. But like, that's on you, bro. You should have been killed this man 1,000 years ago. And Omar Suarez tried to get him killed. That's why they sent him to the Colombians in the first place. Because Omar Suarez already knew off muscle. Right? Off muscle, you don't play around like that.
Hypothetically.
But
for the census. Hypothetically. This is
hypothetically. I also find it funny what is Omar? What do you think of him? He's a fucking peasant, right? And the way Every Abraham says, he's a fucking peasant. He puts on his best, like, high class, a boarding school accent. I think he's a fucking peasant, right? So you get that, and then you get, after that, he goes right to the crib of Frank, and he takes Elvira, right? And you get the famous, and like how that's done. It's done in like this medium where she gets up out of bed, he walks right into bed. You actually get Tony's back for most of it. You see Elvira, she says, "Where's Frank?" It's like, he's dead, right? And she walks out, and then you just get the big, like, super extreme, like, zoom shot of Frank, Tony smoking the cigarette, juxtaposed with like the world is yours blimp, right? And then that real boss ass shot of where you see him in the house and Elvira's getting her clothes, right? They really, you can tell they're really thinking like these people are like feudal giants, right? This is like, if it wasn't guns, it would have been swords and like and people on horseback.
Yeah, a couple things about that whole sequence. One, rewatching, I was like, man, he's putting his bloody hands like all over the sheets of the wife of the man he just killed. Like, from a forensic science, I was just like, this is not a good idea. But then the world is yours blimp. This is like one of the images, right? And then as he gets his mansion, right, he has the world is yours, statue fountain with the neon around it and everything. And Nas has a song on Illmatic, The World Is Yours. But I do think that there is the whole like Du Bois has that line in The Souls of White Folk, whiteness is the ownership of the world forever and ever, amen, right? And I think like it is interesting in that the ideology of this film, right, is just about like literally owning the world, right? And you think about how these billionaires and people like that, that is how they think, right? Like they want to own everything, and it's interesting in that respect because in some ways, I think, and I think Secret Dance Move mentioned this in the chat, and I do sort of agree. Like, there is a way to read this movie as deeply anti-capitalist and as like a critique, right, of America, of capitalism, of all that stuff. And yet that critique is, if that's intended, like the critique does not land at all ultimately. Like what ultimately comes away from this film ideologically is like all of the bad shit that is going on like worms its way into our brains, right? But at the same time, if you just look at it as a text and you talk about like what's actually going on and what is the like the end of this ideology is just a total like nihilistic death drive essentially, right? But somehow that's not what we took away as young folks, I think.
Well, I also think this shows the dangers of a capitalist critique, quote unquote, that doesn't have a point to an alternative positively. Because if you have anti-capitalism side by step with anti-communism,
That's right. It critiques the alternative, right? Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
So what the fuck else are you going to have is this nihilism, like nothing to believe in. And like that's part of like because you also, this movie is very much an 80s movie, but it's part of the ideology of what I would call like the long 70s movie of like a cinema of defeat. Society is at a defeat point, right? Like we don't really have nothing else except to kind of pick over the detritus of the bullshit that we've done in society, right? And that's largely like the ideologies. Some people in that framework, like I think a film like Thief is much smarter, right, than this film, right? Because it has much more of a critique. This film, because I think De Palma is he's so into violence and the depiction of violence, and he has a moralism that I think is just not very politically you're not going to get more than that, and that's like I think the real problem with it. Yeah, I mean, so like the next part you get is like the famous push it to the limit montage, right? You push it to the limit, right? So you see it all the different shots. I mean,
the money machine,
right? The money bags going into the white dude at the bank
president. Like, this is too much money even for my bank.
Right, the white dude doing that, right? Gina gets her beauty shop. She's giving winks to Manolo, right? They're starting to do their shit. Tony Elvira marry, and of course he gets what? A tiger. Was it dancing on the razor's edge? Like those 80s fucking the laugh. It's the laugh. That's
the laugh.
Because he never actually laughed. He just went
on the phone. What's that?
What's that? Right there on the phone. The Tony Montana on his chair, right? The big picture with him and Elvira, like he's doing the excess of capitalism. He's showing the excessive tendencies, right? But like I said, it's very much like those pre-code films where they always love to show how if lumpenized people get money, they're always going to be the most degenerate, right? With it, right? And it's something that like it's a cliche that like has existed for so fucking long, right? You give like gutter people money and they're just going to be fucking tacky, right? They'll have no kind of, and it's very classist in that kind of way, right? Like tackiness will only come from those kinds of people, right? Montana Realty Company. So yeah, he gets the lawyer. The lawyer's like, look, I gotta raise the rates on you, right? You bringing in too much cash into my spot.
He has a management company, a realty company. Gina Montana gets the beauty salon, and there's one other one I'm forgetting. Travel, I think, a travel agency. And they're all like these like, they look like the White House or something like the architecture is like just ridiculous.
It's like Greek almost, right? Like Greek columns kind of, right? Which I think is like a point. Like I think that's like really, really on purpose. They're trying to like show like Tony's like limited kind of scope. And I get it. I think it's like an interesting design.
You never see his mom though. You never see his mom again. Like no. Gina hops on the gravy train. His mom just stays working in Seatown in Hialeah or wherever she was doing. But you don't ever see her ever again.
At the very end, when he goes to see her, when Gina goes missing, but not in this sequence. I love Pacino also, man. Like Pacino's walks are hilarious. Because the other thing about Al is he does come from the streets. Like he was a street dude, and I think that's like another kind of element why I think he had attraction to this role. in a weird, because he sees him as like a street person in this kind of way, but at the same token,
I asked my son when he was little, he was about 7, right? He was talking about how I walk. And I was like, show me how I walk like me. And it looked like that. So apparently I walk like that.
So yeah, the money they he says the monkeys in a Bahamian bank. Oh man, the lawyer when he talks about because Tony's basically like, you're fucking me over. You started getting like the little complaints about capitalism in this sequence from Tony about how like capitalism is unfair and it's trying to fuck certain people who do stuff. I don't know. It sounds like Jay-Z. Honestly, this is where Jay-Z gets his ideology from. Like fuck you. And he talked about, you don't want me to not. He said, first I'll fly it in myself. And then he said, what are you going to do? Trust your money with some monkey in a Bahamian bank. So we see the racism. They got to get a little bit of black racism in there. They haven't had it yet, the movie, There's no dark.
It was wild how not racist the movie was. Given
it's clearly not a Scorsese film, by the way.
Everything considered, like all of it. I was
waiting for it.
That's wild, yo. That's
no N-words. I was like, damn, wow. No Tony, not even Tony. We don't, come on, bro.
We didn't really see black people in the movie either. Like they don't exist in Tony's world, right?
And that's a good point, because I can't lie. I feel like when I was really young, the idea of
Miami in the 80s, no black people.
But for me to know growing up in New York, I didn't really understand Afro-Cubans being a thing maybe until I was like preteen.
Yeah, because of movies like Scarface, of the population or whatever. Yeah,
exactly. But movies like Scarface, I'm thinking if I get Cuban, I'm thinking Stephen Bauer, right, and Tony Montana, who's not even he's a myth. So Tony's like paranoid, the security detail, right? So you get that you get the famous hot tub scene, right? He's like up in the hot tub, right? And he wants to do the new exchange with like the new dude, Soderbaum, right? I think is his name. It's like, you only ever hear the accent say the name, and I'm like, what is the person's accent? How do you say his name? And then you have like lines like, you know what capitalism is, getting fucked, right? And then Elvira says back to him, true capitalist if I ever met one, right? And that's the thing, like they'll start those things, but they never take it further. Right? They never take the conversation further. You get these little like lines here, but they never go, so you get that he's berating Elvira. You see that a lot of that stuff. And then some of the funny lines like, come on, Pelican, which I love. I ain't gonna lie. Come on, Pelican. I was only, so one line I still do every now and then if I piss someone off, I go, I was only kidding. I do that all the time. I'm like, I was only kidding. It's just...
You know what they sound? You know who they sound like? They sound like Ricky Ricardo in fucking I Love Lucy. That's the accent.
So it was on purpose. I was only kidding. Like I do it all the time. It's just, and then Tony's like left alone, right? He basically fuck everybody because he pisses off Manny. He calls him an asshole. And like, this idea of like the single, it's funny. I remember one time I was having an argument with a homie about Kanye West, and he was saying to me, but you got to respect Kanye. I know he's an asshole, but he's singularly minded and really wants something to happen. And I'm like, that's how I think people see Tony Montana also. Yeah, I know he's being a dick and he's being an asshole, but look, he's ambitious. That's what happens with ambitious people. They gotta keep people in line a little bit.
Well, that's what Frank and Sosa saw in him. They were like, I like you. He's clearly an asshole. He's clearly a piece of shit. But they were like, but this is like, I like you. You're straightforward. You say what you think.
And then I think the scene after that is when they get to the money counting where he gets caught. Right? Which funny quick. Go ahead. Was there something before that?
I'm trying to remember the sequencing, but I think No, yeah, that's fine. Let's go to that.
Yeah,
There is, I
yeah.
think you do start to see him and Elvira's relationship fracturing.
In the hot
I
tub
think, in
scene,
there.
but in the hot
Yeah.
tub scene, yeah, it's pretty much where that happens. Like it's fracturing, they argue, and all that type of
And
stuff.
is that the restaurant scene or the restaurant?
No,
after?
that's later. That's after he gets caught, because he's now, and after Sosa pretty much tells him to go, shoot somebody. I mean, blow up some people. Yeah. So one funny little part is, people might not have caught this. At the beginning, they're having this conversation where the one of the cops, so you later find out is a cop, he's talking about a movie that he used to work on, and it's Burn by Gio Pontecorvo. Burn is a very political movie. Gio Pontecorvo is the director of the Battle of Algiers. Burn is a film that he did right after, with starring Marlon Brando. It's also called Quemada. I've talked about it with Dr. Ball and Renee. It's a film kind of about the Haitian Revolution a little bit and things like that, and like the filibuster named William Walker. It's so interesting that they dropped that in the movie. I have no idea why, and I was like looking about why they dropped that in there. It's just
Burn
kind
is
of
dope, though.
Bird is dope. Oh fuck yeah, that's a
dope.
movie. Bird is dope. Bird is dope.
Is dope.
It's such a great film. But anyway, this is where he gets caught. I don't know. You said Hiram. Okay.
Well, first, so I'll let Hiram read the lines, because the lines are classic. I mean, this is one of the most memorable.
Oh, you want me to read it for real?
Yeah. No, I do.
Do it in the accent.
No, I'm not doing it. But the so they're this is the whole counting money, and Tony's like debating with him over $1,500 and all this stuff, right? Saddlebum. So it is like, also Manolo has set up Saddlebum as a replacement for the banking, just for people to understand, but they don't know that this guy's a cop, right? Like, this is what's about to be revealed. And so they're counting the money together, and then they look up, and he's like, look, there's a camera right there, like, you're under arrest. And he does the whole thing of like, where'd you get that badge? That looks nice, where'd you get that, all that kind of stuff. And so he's playing along. But yeah, then you get the famous, probably my favorite sequence in the movie in terms of lines. But yeah, I don't know, Hiram, if you want to read
it. Lock in. I know all that bullshit, Saddlebum. Save your breath. You got nothing on me. You know it. I know it. I'm changing dollar bills. That's all. Do you want to waste my time? Okay. I call my lawyer. He's the best lawyer in Miami. He's such a good lawyer that by tomorrow morning, you're going to be working in Alaska. So just warm.
Boom.
Scene.
And it's that Pacino, man. That Pacino, like, the way he has this thing with his chest.
Okay.
Working in Alaska.
Okay.
It's like a roll of the chest. It's so fucking funny. Man, it's so funny, man. And then of course, like, boom, the next thing is the paper with $5 million bail, right? He posts or some shit like that, right? And yeah, the lawyer pretty much tells him, sorry, bro, you fucked, homie. Like, I can get you off on one, but you definitely doing a couple of years on like the tax evasion, right? And then Tony makes another like capitalism complaint, so forth and so on. But Tony knows he's screwed. So you then get a cut. Go ahead. You want to say something?
Well, just that, I mean, Tony is like, there's the case element, and then Tony's like, well, who can we pay off? Basically, he's like, we have money, like, we can make this, like, we can make anything go away. Which, again, I think this is real, right? Like, and we get to it later on when we get to Sosa, right? But yeah, anyway.
Right. So I put it, this whole country was built on washed money, which, like, is an interesting line.
That's what he says. Yeah.
And I'm like, is that the primary thing that it was built on? washed money? I'm like, yeah, like, that's one perspective, like, it's just that, it's that thing where, like, this is like when Jay-Z gets deep. I'm sorry. I'm taking shots at Jay after his bullshit ass freestyle, looking like Sideshow Bob at Roots Picnic. Yeah, I said it.
Lock. How did his lock? He only had like 2 locks, but like, how did that?
Cats is saying he must have had extensions all these years. I'm hearing all types of rumors.
I mean, probably paid a lot of money to unlock those two
Yeah.
Mr.
But like,
window joints he had.
but like keeping it real, like it becomes like when they seem to have these like, it's like they have these like critiques of capital, but they're thin as fuck and they're all self-serving. It's basically about like, oh yeah, see, capitalism is fucked, but that's why I gotta do this raw shit on the street, right? And it's like even your read of why this shit is fucked is based on your individualistic shit. So you get him basically go back to Bolivia with Sosa, and you get this big famous scene where, and it feels like Tony stepping into like shit that the levels he don't even know, right? And that's kind of like, you know, like the political levels. And I'm sure this is probably what previous scripts wanted to deal with, but the film probably didn't want to. Because when Tony gets in, Sosa's like, you know, we can basically handle this for you, but you got to do something for us. And you have like what? You have like a one. Is he a senator? Is there? I think it's a senator that is there.
I don't know if they say they say he's
Who
a
the white dude
representative
is?
from Washington
Representative.
D.C. Like I
And
don't know
he's
if they say
there.
like, yeah, I don't know if they say his
Yeah,
political
I'm probably
title, but
confusing it. I'm confusing it with like the Godfather and like the Senator, Godfather 2 with the Senator that they have in there. They have that. They have someone who's like high up in the military in one of the countries. I think in Bolivia, right? And you have like other like Latin American political people, and they're basically watching a video of a journalist who's basically calling out their whole entire operation. And he's supposed to speak at the United Nations, and they're like, we need you to basically, you know, bring our homie Alberto, played by Mark Margolis, to basically roll up in there. He doesn't speak English, so we need you to basically be his driver, right? You know, and I also have never thought this worked. Tony suddenly having this kind of moral code of no women, no kids, I've always found it a little thin, even when I did like the movie. Like, I get it, but I'm like, sure, right? It doesn't, they don't establish it, I think, strong enough that he has some kind of like deeper code that he wouldn't basically do this thing to save his entire operation, right? It never really worked for me as like a storyline. I think it's a bit bullshit, personally. So redemption, I don't think, yeah, okay. If it is, that's a really bad redemption. I saw that in the chat. But yeah, so you get that sequence, and then you get the dinner sequence, right? Where they're, you know, and this is the other scene that I got homies who love the fucking monologue, right? Where they basically argue, right? And she gets thrown off and all that type of stuff. And, you know, Elvira, they had the big argument, and he has the say hi to the bag. I literally saw someone quote that. I think it was Bill Simmons or someone quote say hi to the bad guy the other day. I saw one of those people quote that line.
it's I mean it was huge. You know what I mean? I mean
The
the
impact, you
cultural.
realize the impact that this movie has had on the way people see life, communicate, or you know what I'm saying? Like the quotes that they hang is wild. Yeah.
Yeah, it's wild. Like that whole sequence. Like I remember when I was really into acting, I used to love that scene because like it's like done mostly in one shot that's turning, so you get to see him physically. And you know, you don't really, if you watch a lot of movies, you don't get to watch actors full body do scenes. A lot of times you're getting them from the waist up, especially in like big emotional scenes. So like Pacino, he's doing this shit where he's like his head is going this way, but his body is moving this way, right? So he's like on like a swivel while he's doing the sequence, you know, and the shot is like turning. So like they have this way where like he'll be going this way, but the shot is going, and then he'll go back this way, right? So it makes you feel wobbly in that way. So like, you know, it's that acting, but you know, you add that with like the really questionable accent, and you know, Pacino doing his weird thing. It's just so say hi to them. And then there's another line that I always use, and I think it's just funny. I always tell the truth, even when I lie. That line, which I do I fuck with that line. So you see a back and let me. I literally heard someone, I think it was Bill Simmons, said it like last week on one of his like things. Say hi to the bad guy, right? You know, I think because he was saying something like OKC was gonna lose or some shit. Say hi to the bad guy, right? Or about SGA's flopping or something. So like it's on everything, right? So yeah, you get that, and then you get to basically the failed assassination attempt in New York, like in the car they're with there. Basically, the whole thing is famous. He gives it, sees the kids come in. Right, first he sees the journalist, and they're about to go do it. He's also calling back home because Manolo's gone missing. They don't know where he is. Gina's missing as well. They don't know where she is. So he's a little stressed out, and he's calling back and forth. They're in the car, and then the journalist walks in, and then his two kids go in, and and it's shot actually like very much like if anybody's ever seen what's his name? Oh God, the French director who did like Army of Shadows, Melville. It's very Melville shot. Kind of. I think they was paying a bit of a homage to him. He did like these like crime gangster movies in France. So they're kind of following that going down through it, and then you get the scene. I don't know if anybody wants to talk about that, where he doesn't press the button.
Yeah, so Alberto the Shadow is with him, right? He's the one who's going to make sure that the hit goes through, and he has this like very old school, I mean, this was high tech stuff at the time.
High tech back then. That was.
But yeah, they planted a bomb underneath his car, right? They didn't know the kids are going to be there. And the Shadow's basically like, we got to go through. Like, he doesn't think twice about it. He's like, we got to go through with it. Like, Sosa says we got to kill the guy. Like, we can't let him get to the UN because he's going to give a speech at the UN talking about our drug trade, essentially, right? And, but Tony is not willing to, and I agree with you, M2Me, it's not well established given the moral code that we've seen from Tony. But on the other side, like, he doesn't kill women and children anywhere else in the film. He does kill women, actually, but not children else in the film. Actually, maybe he does it because no, the women that die actually are killed around him, but not by him. Yeah. Anyway, so that's the code. He won't do it, so he blows Alberto's head off, right? And then after that, makes a couple calls. Well, does he call? No, the Sosa calls later.
He calls first. He calls home first, and basically still can't find Gina. Mom, I think he hears that his mom has called. He can't find Manolo, and he's bugging, so he has to basically get back to the crib, and they get back, there.
And then there's the great scene when he gets back, and he's got the gold phone, right? Which also, like, I think of the Cool G rap line, also on a Tony Touch tape, gold phone, take me to war, right? But like,
I forgot
he's
about
got
that one.
The gold phone, and then he has the speaker, it's like this funny looking like it's a speaker phone, but it's just like this box, right? With like holes in it, basically. And he's talking to Sosa on it, and he gets all mad because Sosa's talking shit to him, basically like, I told you not to fuck me, like, and all this stuff. And
I told you a long time ago not to fuck. Oh, who the fuck
who the fuck you talking about, man?
Oh, boy.
You want to go to war? You gotta say, which is like, I'm sorry, I hear it. I just hear. It just rolls in my head, man. It's like Pavlov. I mean, the other funny part of that sequence, though, Jay, is like how he just lays out the coke, and your man Pacino does like the lean down to snort it. And like, it's the thing when you make this shit so grandiose, like, people, like, I know it's supposed to be campy, but like, think about people whose like existence is like really idolizing that shit. That shit becomes like an ideal. Like, I want to have coke on the fucking table, and I want to just basically snort big lines of coke on the table. I want to be able to, tell Sosa, you want to go to war, but also it's like, it's nuts. It's just absolutely nuts. And it's like, you know what? If that's how my life's going to go out, I want to go out like Tony, because it was cinematic and that shit looks phenomenal. That shit looks phenomenal, and everybody, even Walter White, loved it on Breaking Bad. Right when he watches it with his son, the NC in Breaking Bad, it's fucking hilarious.
I told you a long time ago. That's it.
Yeah. So you have that, and then Tony goes sees mom. Right, because mom is like, you fucked up. Gina's disappeared. I know she has like a spot she's living in. And this is where he gets the address and he rolls up and they got like the fly crib and opens the door. And then it's Manolo in like, a nice little, after love robe. And then you see Gina in like the nice little shot up. And then I've always hated, even when I liked the movie, I've always hated the Tony Go Psycho music. I've always hated the Tony Go Psycho. It's so stupid, right? And he then shoots Manolo, right? And Gina's over him. It's more Shakespeare and like the tragedy of he kills his friend, and and you get to see a bit of like he has some recognition of it a little bit, but he's not quite there. He's fucked up.
He's doing so much cocaine in these scenes too, right? Because you had the line before he talks to Sosa, then he does another big one, and then he's in the car before he goes into their house and he's taking bumps. Like he is like this whole last 30 minutes of film, it's just like everything is interspersed with like constant cocaine use, basically.
Yeah.
I've never done cocaine, but at some point I'm like, there's got to do something to you. There's no way you can just take that much like that in that short period of time and still be able to function. He's not doing the geeky like mouth thing and nothing.
He's Tony Montana. You fuck with him, you fucking with the best. It's the truth.
You're right.
Right? So you get back, Gina's all like, she's now Tony's house, right? Colby, can we right? She's tripping, and when the car gets in, you start with the dudes coming out the bushes, right? Sosa's now come, they coming out the bushes.
Real quick. I know we're short on time, right? Again, these people do this to themselves. So if your brother is on some other shit, and Manolo has been known Tony's been on some other shit since Cuba, right? Since Cuba. So then it's like, why do you all decide we're going to go have a secret wedding, you know what I'm saying, and go way out and do our own thing and not tell him what's going on? Why are you going to answer the door and be all cool and not slam the door closed or whatever, or at least Gina hide, right? Gina comes out, robe open. She just finished getting, doing the do. In Tony's mind, he's flipping out because his sister, his property, his whatever has been deflowered. She's out here with this after Yamin glow with the joint open, letting him know we just finished doing wild shit. Manolo, who he knows is just nothing but about that time, clapping everything all the time. He probably feels some type of way about that, like you're treating my sister like another one of these whatever women that you just discard, discard at your will because that's who you are as a scumbag dude. And now you're making my sister one of those. Why would you not kind of like talk to them or say, why is she standing up there with her joint open, and they're both of them smiling in his face like, yeah, we did that. We did that.
Right. They'd have had the video camera. And they'd have been like, oh shit, that's Tony. They'd been like, oh shit, that's Tony. They would have
as soon as he knocks on the door. Right? Who's knocking on my door at this hour? It's gotta be Tony. Who else? Stay your ass in the fucking room. Why are you coming out on a little balcony to show your brother that, yo, look what I just did? You know who this man is. Why are you acting brand new? And then it's just a rule. There's also a rule where like your boys are not supposed to date your sister. It's a boy thing. It's a boy code. It's like, you know what I'm saying? Because you have conversations. You have ridiculous, insane, stupid conversations that young men have or whatever, and then you're not trying to associate this dude doing that with her or whatever. And so he's breaking all of these codes, and they're both smiling in this man's face after he done did about 2 pounds of fucking cocaine, knowing that Sosa and the Bolivians are gonna fucking come kill him because he just called him a monkey and whatever on the phone. It's like, you don't fuck with me. I don't know. I don't feel no kind of. I don't feel no remorse for Manolo. Manolo and Gina, like they should have went about that a whole other way.
But and they totally, and I think to your point, Hiram, they construct the film in that way to make you not have any remorse for them. Like they're just idiots in this kind of way, and like they should have known better. It's like it's how you contrive the story of how people kind of move along, right? Within the logic of the story, they are dumb, and they should get it. Right within the logic of the story, it's stupid, but like you said, in the real world, Manolo would have been like, "Well, who's here? Come on, he's a gangster." He'd have been like, "Who up in here? Oh shit, that's Tony. Yeah, baby."
He's also supposed to be the security. He's also supposed to be in charge of security.
Not on post again because he's too busy worried about the buns.
Right. So it's like it's all contrived, right?
And easy. Normally in real life, Tony would be like, "Yo, not my sister," and be like, "Cool, not your sister," because then that would have become Manolo's sister, right? And true, if we're following all it culturally and the boy code and all that, that becomes your sister. So now she gets to inherit yet another father. That's a whole other story. But it wouldn't have gone down like that unless you want some other type time, at which point then get shot twice in your living room, dog, because you earned that. You earned
that. So
I don't have a sister, but I would have shot you too.
Allegedly.
I don't have a sister, so don't add this.
Allegedly. So yeah, we get back to Tony's compound, and they're all like, begin descending in, and they really draw out the sequence where like, Gina's like the raging, she's now, I don't want to go back to Tony's house, and she's like the crying distressed woman. She's lost her man. Tony's high, and then it is funny, man, the sequence where he's back up in his office, and they're like, "So Tony, what are we about to do?" "We gotta go to
Before that, he says, "We gave her some pills. She's gonna be all right now."
So Tony says, "We gotta go to war." Right? It's hilarious. And shout out to those two actors. They play it perfectly. Like, okay, Tony. Like they it's hilarious. Because like, deep if they can't take a step to really think, as they know if they take the real step, they go, "Well, we're done, dude." Like shit is over, right? And you see them starting to creep in, right? He's starting to reflect. Go ahead.
One thing I don't think we mentioned, just to add, because I know I'm not disagreeing with all y'all said, but Gina and Manolo got married, and she reveals that to Tony after he kills him, right? So this also drives Tony then into an even darker state, right? Because he has now killed his best friend, and he was trying to do right by Gina, right? Like is the sort of like, and feels all apologetic about it after the fact, but goes back, does more coking, says we're going to war.
Yeah. So we're in there, and then Gina then comes into and you get the very famous scene where she's like, pretty much only covered by her robe. She's like naked, and she has a gun. And, they kind of complete the incest narrative where she's like, you can't stand anybody else to want to be with me. So why don't you, take me, and, and the F me Tony and all that type of stuff. And like, I don't know, man, like it's kind of similar to like what we talked about with like, when you said, some of those sequences you talk about with like Spielberg, who actually has a little thing at the end of this movie, which I'll mention. About like, this kind of like playing out about carnal desires of like younger women or your sister. These things are just really, really like so over obsessed, I think, within like European and its descendant writings. It's like it's just whack to me, because like, I'm not saying people don't have things or whatever, but it's like it becomes like the core thing. It becomes the core relation to develop between an antagonism between a brother and sister, right? Or some kind of like drive, or what drives people. And I think it largely is a way to actually not talk about political things or look about things from a political standpoint and real social relations and real social development. It's like creating these kind of like inert drives that the human have, or like the male has. The male always wants his sister, always wants his, and it's like, it's bullshit, dude. It's stuff, because the reason why I say this is because when I was in a lot of acting training, we do Greek stuff, it would always come up. And like, I wanted to talk about other shit and like talk about like social context, and no one wanted to talk about that shit. Right? They all want to talk about Freudian, bullshit. Something I've been talking with Laura about a lot, and like these kind of really limited scopes of how we see like this, like the psychic sphere, and really pop bullshit psychology that gets like trafficked into a lot of movie shit. So yeah. Anyway, so like she's shooting him, right? she gets him in the leg, right?
Yeah.
In the leg, right? And then homie just rolls through the window and just lays her full of bullets, right? And then of course,
yeah, we should say that like he has all of these TV screens, right? Which is like very high tech surveillance for 1982 or whatever, right? But like, and you can see as all these things are going on, like this like swarm, right, of like 50, 60, just more and more guys keep coming. Over the walls and everything else. And yeah, there's this one assassin basically that comes up into their room and sees her first and shoots, machine guns her basically.
Yeah. So, and then you get the beginning of like the iconic fucking sequence. He's like, first, he's like, cuddling Gina, and he's like talking to her. She's dead, right? They're all coming in. You have the Sicario in the back with the glasses. His other assassin, rolling up in with the gat. They're all rolling up in. The shootout starts, and I can't lie. Even this time, right? Because like there's like that sequence is fine. It's right until when the dude goes to his door, Tony's door, and he's like, "Tony, let me in," and he shoots him. And the bag goes, Chi-Chi. With Chi-Chi, yeah, and he dies. And right when Pacino goes, "You want to fuck with me?" You fucking with the best, right? And like, man, it's funny. It's hard to watch because this shit is like, it's you have so many emotions and it taps into all the worst. I'll let you go, Jay. Like, it taps into all the worst parts of like Blaze of Glory.
I think this is also, I have to say, like, if you think about this movie and why, like, what is the ultimate, like, why do people want to be Tony, right? Like, obviously it's it's the money, it's the power, it's the women. He has all the shit, right? The beautiful house, all the but like there is something about that he doesn't just easily get killed at the end. He kills like 100 people before he gets killed.
Yeah,
right. And so
Rambo.
Yeah, so it is like it allows him, even in this, being this monstrous figure, this, runner of this massive multi-million-dollar enterprise, criminal enterprise, all of this stuff, right? That he comes off as the underdog at the end.
Yeah.
Right. So you're rooting for him as he's just blasting an army, basically, right? Say hello to my little friend, right? And grenade launcher, like blasting grenades, shooting guys, like just taking out whole rows
and
just
eating bullets too.
Yes,
take your fucking bullet.
Eating, right? Like he's just like, come on, fuck you, like, and just eating those and still standing. I'm like, is that cocaine or is that PCP? Because this man feels nothing. Mind you, the amount of cocaine he had on that desk is like 10 bricks worth, maybe. It's an insane, but he ate all those bullets and was still standing.
I'm still standing, right?
Still standing.
Oh man, yeah. Like, like the lines, man. Like, in the way it's shot, it's like the other thing is because Pacino is like what 5'3", right? So Pacino, this small ass little dude with these big ass guns, right? And the way he kind of like, he just yanks the gun up, right? And like, that shot where he just like he crouches. Like, I'm sorry. Yeah, your man Stallone got the guns, but I'm sorry. There's something about Al Pacino. If you're from a certain kind of like life,
in a suit,
say hello to my little friend, right? Which is bigger than him. His gun, little friend. What are you talking about? The gun is taller than you, homie.
And in real life, those rifles are heavy. Those rifles are not something you just flinging around like that.
He's like, you want that? You want more? Like it's the hood shit. It's like, and I think Pacino, because it's the thing is Pacino is from the hood. He grew up in East Harlem. Yes, he's an Italian dude, but he knows that energy. No, he's shorter than that. I mean, I'm only 5'8". I'm not saying anything like that, but I'm saying he is small. So seeing a guy who's not ripped with muscles, like being able to wield the gun that confidently, right? And like kill you and talk shit at you at the same time. You know what I'm saying? Like,
and kill mad people. Was out there killing mad people.
Right.
Assassins,
and he gets
like trained cartel assassins, using the guy as a human shield, the body, and still.
And the only guy who could get him is the dude who comes at him from behind.
Right. They had to sneak him.
Right.
With the double-barreled shotgun, sawed off.
Yeah.
Like a foot away from his body. Just blows. Yeah. And then he falls, of course, into the fountain. Blood everywhere. The blood so quickly diffuses into the water. All the water turns red, and it goes. It pans back up with "The World Is Yours."
Yeah. I also don't believe he was 5'6". I've been next to Al Pacino. He's shorter. I'm serious. He wears heels. Yeah,
5'6" in heels.
Man.
He's
5'6"
in heels. He's
a little guy.
I'm sorry.
Little guy.
I don't buy it.
Little guys.
So no, but like, and I mean, yeah. Oh, the Spielberg thing I was gonna say was apparently he was on set and he like did a couple of the outside shots of it that De Palma quotes that. But yeah, like that end sequence. I always say to my friends is like that nihilism, like that becomes to me for a lot of people that I've seen. It becomes like what they actually see as like a good death. And I think when we're thinking about the kind of like context of this series, and I think the kind of like social reproduction of people and how they see stuff, like that Tony Montana death, because the nihilism that exists, I think, about society, they don't really believe in anything else. What they can believe in is like a Tony Montana style blaze of glory, right? Like that becomes the thing, right? And like in hip hop, they really identify it pretty heavy. And I just know people. I said this to Hiram, as we come into a close, but I went to drop off my daughter. Within 20 minutes of coming back this way, I see 2 people in Scarface t-shirts. And I live in the BX. 2 at different moments within 20 minutes, and one of them is like him with like the gun in the final scene, like, crouched out. And another one is him in the shot up in The World Is Yours thing with the arm and the cigarette, But yeah, man, I don't know if other folks have thoughts.
The movie is full of shit. It's bullshit. It's fucked up, but it's a classic nonetheless. It is. I will probably end up watching it again at some point in my life because it is, And yeah, you end up rooting for Tony because the whole movie is basically poor Tony. The whole movie is set up in a way where it's like, poor guy. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like he's somehow everybody's underdog or whatever, but you shouldn't have fucked with Sosa. Sosa told him, don't fuck with me. And he did.
Wow. You said, so you recall in the early aughts, there was a sold Air Force Ones in the Scarface black and white. I don't remember that. Does anybody remember the Scarface black and white and red colorway for Air Force Ones? I don't remember that.
Were they like official Uptowns or were they the knockoff? Because there was always like a lot of knockoff Uptowns because I've seen like Scarface sneakers, but I don't know if they were like Nike. I don't think Nike would do that, but you had like knockoff Uptowns.
Yeah, I mean, there was a lot of different scarf. I mean, they had the video games. I know the rapper Cuban Link was trying to do a sequel movie where like Tony had a secret child. It'd be called like Son of Scarface. Apparently, he couldn't get the rights.
Something like that.
Yeah, and like I know the Bregmans. I actually talked to Michael Bregman about it. They actually like were thinking about it, letting him do it, but he wanted to play it, and they didn't. They're like he couldn't act. So they were like, no, you can like help us produce it. You know, usually put your name on it. We'll give you like a small role in it. And then
Which
it,
is funny because he is real Cuban with a real scar.
Yeah. I think that's why he wanted to do it. And like the whole thing when they were like, nah, I remember like him literally telling me that in a conversation
trash,
that
bro.
I had.
That
Oh, it would have been
would have
so
been so
bad.
ass.
It'd have
That
been
would have
so
been
bad.
so ass.
You
Because
know,
Tony doesn't have any kids anyway. I don't know how you would do that. Tony's got no kids.
Yeah, also you're gonna have it like it'll be like Creed, right? Like he had an illegitimate kid somewhere.
Right, some illegitimate kid.
Yeah, it's just corny, man, you know. But yeah, no, Scarface, look, man, I ain't gonna lie. Like I said, I can't stand a lot of it. It gets on my nerves. But some of those sequences, it's more like the scenes. I'm just like, this scene is hilarious.
I mean,
right?
It birthed a lot of rap lines. There's a lot of rap songs. Like Jared opened up with that. A lot of rap songs. There's the infamous or the famous Biggie and Tupac together, right? The freestyle at Madison Square Garden. That legendary one. Well, how the line goes, like smoking weed like Tony Montana sniffing the air. That's crazy blunts, something like that, right? It's like, but it's the Biggie Tupac freestyle at Madison Square Garden where he talks about that. I put the shot into your body.
I mean, and folks brought it up again in the chat. I mean, Scarface the rapper, you know, I mean, and then he has albums and songs, right, that are references to the movie for sure. I mean, Only Built for Cuban Links to me is like, you know, and it's interesting. I mean, I haven't looked at this, but I saw the clip and I didn't actually click to, but the suggestion was that, which connects to what you said earlier on about RZA, that RZA actually was the idea behind that it didn't come from Ray and Ghost first, that they were like, you know, that the idea of doing Cuban Links and making it a mafia album, which is like, it's hard to, there's no single origin point, because you have Scarface the rapper, you have Cool G Rap, who references this movie quite a bit. But that album in 95, like, and there's also references on Illmatic, but that album in 95 really like becomes a launching board or springboard, I guess, for a whole bunch of, you know, the mafia rap, basically.
Oh, why did I drink cappuccino, scar on my face, but I'm not Al Pacino, right? Big Drew Ha in the video trying to act like he's Latin, even though he's Jewish, you know? But he says that in the line, right? He says, what is the line he says? I lie to them, I tell them that I'm Spanish, right? In the early boot camp thing. Yeah. He has that line where he talks about that. Yeah.
But there was a lot of that merging of Scarface with like Italian mafia. Yes. Right. So yeah. Wu has Scarface quotes in the audio in the songs, but they're Wu Gambinos, right? And it was that whole like merging of Italians and Scarface kind of overlapping in that way.
Yeah, and I think that goes to the point that M2 made earlier, right? Which is like, you have Godfather 1 and 2, and then you have this movie. Nobody gives a fuck about Godfather 3. Like, that's a terrible movie, right? But like, it is these three that kind of are the canon of, you know, and I think because Pacino's in both of, you know, he's throughout that series too, it's just kind of, it is sort of blended. Cinematically, it's all the same. And that's even why, like, when I rewatched this time, I was obviously paying more attention to ideology. So I was paying more attention to all the anti-Fidel, anti-Cuba, anti-communist stuff that's within the film. But when I was growing up, that stuff it just like washed over me. Like, I didn't actually care or internalize that much. I mean, I'm sure that there are people who absolutely do, but, you know, it was like, because there's a way you could watch it and forget that they're Cuban, almost like.
I want to know what the exile community thinks of it now. I know the exile community didn't like it, because they were like, no, not us, no, we know that. Yeah. Lying motherfuckers.
That's supposedly why, by the way, that they filmed the Freedom Town in LA, was because they were afraid of getting protested by Miami Cubans if they did that, like
Well,
concentration camp.
they
there.
apparently were already getting tons of heat. That's what Bregman has said, and that they were like, I mean, De Palma says we were ran out of town. He says the few things they had to do in Miami, he said he even had security detail. Like, I think a lot of what I would say is, from what I've seen and various things, I think it's a lot like The Sopranos. I think the conservative types who really care about image, I don't think the anti-Castro stuff is enough for them, right? The anti-Fidel stuff is enough for them. It's just the fact that like Cubans are depicted as criminals, right? Rather, they want like the Cubans. So like you end up getting later movies where Cubans are depicted as good Americans, right? So like they'll definitely, so it's that kind of like conservative, you know, kind of thing vibe. They'll always look at Scarface, because you saw that with like Italian, like sort of Italian Americans with like the Sopranos. They didn't fuck with that shit, or they hate The Godfather. I remember one time I had a homie I grew up with. He's Italian, right? And his mother, like, she hates all Italian gangster movies, and like they're liberal. She's like, that is bad for us. Fuck all that shit. I never knew a gangster in my life. Like, they're just super against it.
Anti-Italian discrimination. That's what that is. Maron. Anti-Italian discrimination.
Yeah.
No, I wonder what the Cubans of our generation, right, growing up at that time, would have thought when Scarface was like popular and the thing, right? How they would have interpreted that. Having known that, right, there's an actual Cuban mafia. There's an actual, like, you know, these elements that existed in Miami and New Jersey. Wonder what that looks like. But it's definitely not Gusano enough for them, right? It wouldn't be enough of like. But if you read the speech, if you go back and read the speech that Fidel gives about Mariel, it's there. He was like, this is who's leaving. This is what you're gonna get. This is what you can expect, right? This is why they didn't like being here, because they couldn't do that here. So this is what you're getting. Good luck.
Yeah, I think they more like stuff like probably like Mambo Kings, probably the end of that, and Before Nightfall, which is a deeply anti-communist movie by Julian Schnabel, but he's an anti-communist. I can't stand Julian Schnabel, but yeah, I can't. Yeah, his politics, bro. Woo, that's a bad dude. Like, thumbs down.
I don't even know who he is, but that's okay.
Yeah, I mean, Basquiat. He did the Basquiat film. Schnabel knew Basquiat. That's boo. He's just a bad piece of, no. Whack.
All right. Well, Hiram, thank you. Thank you for gracing us with your presence.
Yeah.
This was cool. I mean, before we leave, and to end it on a note, the situation in Cuba is definitely very, 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 very serious, right? And so Scarface touches on it barely in the very beginning, but there is a mafia, right? There is a power building plan that has been decades growing, that now is at its peak and is using its power and its influence that it has been able to amass since before Mariel, since all of that, right, to put in position now that is about basically killing the Cuban people and stealing that land and ultimately turning it into Puerto Rico, which is a whole other situation, but turning it into, right, a colonial fucking slave state for the US. And these individuals who, while they may hold Cuban heritage and Cuban identity, do not give two shits about the people inside of Cuba and would gladly watch them blown up, starve to death, and killed, just as they could take that land. And so all the solidarity that you can muster, that we can muster, right, is most needed now. There are different organizations doing different things. There's the National Network on Cuba. There is IFCO. There are a number of folks who are trying to get goods and sending goods to Cuba. Delegations that continue to go to Cuba to, not only shine light, but bring resources to the people. And ultimately, regardless of what you feel about communism or socialism or whatever, sovereignty is real, right? And it should be the decision of the Cuban people and the Cuban people alone, what type of society, what type of government that they want, right, to have without interference from a colonial power like the United States. And so as we talk and we laugh about this movie and it sort of indirectly barely touches on that, we're in a very historical moment in time, right? That brings us full circle. And so definitely want to end this on that note. Cuba needs us more than ever. Cuba has always stood for all of us, right? And will continue to do so. I was just at the Asada Memorial 2 days ago, right? And Cuba, who suffered. And regardless of what deals they could have made with the United States to bring them out of that suffering by just handing the sister over, said, we will rather suffer, right, than do that. And suffering they are. And so just want to end it. We can laugh and we joke and it's all good, but definitely want to bring it back to what's most important.
Yeah, I mean, just to kind of put a couple of extra things on that. And I wanted to say it up top. I would definitely also check out, Jay's conversation with Alex Avina and Musa about Cuba. I was watching it yesterday. It took me a couple of days to get to it. And I think it's important to really be armed with good information on this stuff. And definitely there's a lot of efforts out there. Like, you can find them. If you need to find them, hit up one of the three of us and we'll give you the list. We got it. If you don't know where to go, we got you on that. And also just check out, Cuban cinema, man. If you want to know about Cuba, check out their own shit. I did a great episode with Stephen Osuna about memories of underdevelopment. Cuba is one of the great cinematic legacies there is of any nation. So if you want to know about Cuba, watch their stuff, documentaries, narrative films. That's the source, right? Scarface is just an imperialist influenced stuff.
One last thing to plug, Claudia de la Cruz from IFCO, executive director there, is going to be here on Thursday. We're going to do an episode and we'll be talking about different efforts and organizing and ways that people can support, tap in, as well as, I'm sure, talking about liberation theology and Cuba and, more. So, and I'll put the link, or actually I can post it here. The link to IFCO there is ifconews.org. So
I think you're muted, Hiram.
Yeah, you're muted, Hiram.
All right. I know that IFCO one has been still accepting applications for those folks who want to study medicine in Cuba. Even throughout all of this, Cuba is still providing free medical school to folks from underprivileged communities from around the world. So they're still accepting those applications and doing that. And then there is, I think, a delegation or delegations that are coming up that IFCO leads. Other folks lead them as well, but like going to Cuba. And so if you want to go see not only Cuba for yourself, but more importantly, the impacts of your government on other people and what that looks like. It's one thing to hear it. It's another thing to actually see the impacts and the consequences of your government on other people. Definitely check in with them, and they can also connect you to other groups if you want to go with other organizations.
Yeah, right on. All right, thank you for all of that, fellas, and thank you for this conversation. This was great. Yep. And we'll be, I don't know what we're doing next.
Appreciate it. Appreciate being on here with you all. I know you all
get
serious and is very knowledgeable about these things, and so I'm glad I can come in and add a little bit of my tomfoolery.
But you was dropping bars too. Stop it, Hiram.
Yeah.
You was giving us the wisdom. You was set up a lot of context. I appreciate that. We all appreciate that.
All right, peace, everybody.